Imagine this: you've prepared for weeks, you finally sit in front of the interviewer, and within the first 2 minutes, you make a mistake you didn't even realize was a mistake. That's exactly what happens to thousands of cybersecurity freshers. So today, I'm breaking down the 100 most common interview mistakes, so you can avoid them and stand out as a strong candidate.
The Ultimate Cybersecurity Interview Guide, 100 Mistakes to Avoid.
Welcome to the most comprehensive interview prep video you will ever need. Freshers often fail interviews not because of a lack of knowledge, but because of common, avoidable mistakes. In this masterclass, we will cover 100 of these critical mistakes across 12 chapters. For each one, we will not just tell you the answer, we will break down why it is a red flag and give you a powerful framework to answer like a seasoned professional. Bookmark this video, take notes, and let's make sure you ace your next interview. Chapter 1, Foundational Knowledge Mistakes. Number 1, Not knowing basic networking concepts.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks a foundational question like, "Can you explain what a subnet is?" or, "How does a packet get from your computer to a web server?" and the candidate gives a vague, uncertain answer or simply says they do not know.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is an instant disqualifier. Networking is the absolute foundation of cybersecurity. Lacking this knowledge is like a doctor not understanding the circulatory system. It signals that the candidate is not ready for a professional role. 2. Shows a lack of curiosity and effort. These are not obscure concepts. It tells the interviewer that the candidate has not put in the fundamental effort to learn the prerequisites for the field they want to enter. 3. Undermines all other skills. Even if you know about a specific tool, without understanding the networking concepts behind it, your knowledge is incomplete and impractical.
The high signal solution: master and articulate the core concepts.
Answer: before any interview, you must be able to confidently explain the building blocks. For a subnet, you should say, a subnet, or subnetwork, is a logical subdivision of an IP network. It allows us to break down a large network into smaller, more manageable segments. This is critical for both security and efficiency. From a security perspective, it allows us to create isolated zones, like a DMZ for our web servers, separating them from our internal corporate network. If a web server is compromised, the subnet boundary helps contain the breach. Number 2, confusing OSI versus TCP/IP models.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, "Can you explain the difference between the OSI and TCP/IP models?" and the candidate replies with a shallow answer like, "One is theoretical and has 7 layers, while TCP/IP is practical and has 4.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Reveals a surface-level understanding. These models are the primary way we conceptualize and troubleshoot network communication. Confusing them shows a lack of deep study. 2. Inability to map theory to reality. The key skill is not just listing the layers, but understanding how real-world devices and protocols map onto them. 3. A gateway question to deeper topics. This question is often used as a litmus test. Failing it makes the interviewer hesitant to ask more complex questions about firewalls or intrusion detection systems.
The high signal solution: define, differentiate, and apply with a security context.
Answer: demonstrate a complete understanding. Say this: the OSI model is a 7-layer conceptual framework that provides a granular, vendor-neutral standard for how network communications should work. It is incredibly useful for detailed troubleshooting. The TCP/IP model is a 4-layer functional model that is the practical implementation used by the Internet today. The key difference for cybersecurity is how we map security controls to these layers. For instance, a traditional packet filtering firewall operates at layer 3, network, and layer 4, transport, of the OSI model, making decisions based on IP addresses and ports. In contrast, a more advanced web application firewall, or WAF, operates at layer 7, application, allowing it to inspect the actual content of HTTP requests to block threats like SQL injection, something a layer 3 firewall cannot do. Number 3, not understanding IP, MAC, ports, protocols?
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, what is the difference between an IP and a MAC address, and the candidate says, they are both addresses for a computer, but one is for hardware and one is for software, failing to explain their actual roles in networking.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. These are the nouns and verbs of networking. Not knowing them is like being illiterate in the field. It is impossible to analyze logs, firewall rules, or packet captures without this knowledge. 2. Shows a complete lack of practical application. Anyone who has set up a home router or used a simple command like IP protocol configuration should have a basic grasp of these concepts. 3. Makes it impossible to understand security tools. The function of a SIM, firewall, or IDs is entirely based on monitoring and making decisions based on IPs, MACs, ports, and protocols.
The high signal solution. Use an analogy to explain the relationship.
Answer. Use a clear analogy to show you understand how they work together. Say this, I think of it like the postal system for a large apartment building. The MAC address is like the specific apartment number. It is a unique, permanent hardware address that never changes and is used for local communication on the same network. The IP address is like the building street address. It is a logical address that can change and is used to route traffic across the internet. The port number is like the name of the person living in the apartment. It tells the computer which specific application or service the data is intended for, like port 443 for HTTPS web traffic. Finally, the protocol, like TCP or UDP, is the set of rules for how the mail should be delivered, reliably and in order, or quickly without guaranteed delivery. Number 4. Not knowing TCP versus UDP differences.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, when would you use TCP over UDP, and the candidate says, TCP is for reliable things like websites, but cannot explain the underlying mechanism like the three-way handshake or provide a contrasting example for UDP.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Misses the core trade-off of networking. The difference between TCP and UDP represents the fundamental trade-off between reliability and speed. 2. Shows an inability to analyze traffic. Understanding this difference is crucial for analyzing network scans or understanding why certain applications behave the way they do. 3. Leads to misunderstanding of attacks. Many network-based attacks, like SYN flood, specifically target the mechanics of the TCP handshake. Not knowing this makes it impossible to understand the attack.
The high signal solution. Explain the mechanism and link to use cases.
Answer. Go beyond the simple definition and explain the mechanics and why they matter. Say this, TCP, or Transmission Control Protocol, is all about reliability. It establishes a connection using a three-way handshake, guarantees that packets are delivered in the correct order, and retransmits any lost packets. This makes it perfect for applications where data integrity is critical, like loading a web page, sending an email, or transferring a file. UDP, or User Datagram Protocol, is all about speed. It is connectionless, meaning it just sends packets without any handshake or guarantee of delivery. This makes it ideal for real-time applications where a few lost packets are acceptable but low latency is essential, such as video streaming, online gaming, or DNS lookups. The trade-off is simple, reliability versus speed. Number 5. Weak understanding of DNS.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, can you explain DNS? And the candidate only provides a one-sentence answer. DNS turns domain names into IP addresses, without explaining the process or its critical security implications.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. DNS is a critical point of failure and attack. It is often called the phone book of the Internet, and many attacks like DNS poisoning, hijacking, and tunneling exploit it. A weak understanding is a major knowledge gap. 2. Shows a lack of big-picture thinking. Understanding the recursive lookup process shows you can trace a request from start to finish, which is a key analytical skill. 3. It is a foundational service. Virtually every Internet transaction begins with a DNS query. Not understanding it means you are missing the first step of almost every network event you will ever have to analyze.
The high signal solution, explain the process and connect it to security.
Answer: first, explain the process clearly, then pivot to the security risks. Say this: DNS, the domain name system, is indeed the Internet's phonebook, translating human-readable names like google.com into machine-readable IP addresses. This happens through a recursive process where your computer asks a series of servers, the recursive resolver, then root servers, TLD servers, and finally authoritative name servers, to find the correct IP. From a security standpoint, DNS is critical and often targeted. Attackers can use DNS poisoning to redirect users from a legitimate site, like a bank, to a malicious phishing site. It is also used for command and control, where malware on an infected machine uses DNS queries to communicate with the attacker's server. That's why monitoring DNS traffic and using secure protocols like DNS over HTTPS are so important for enterprise security. Number 6. Confusing private versus public IP.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, "Can you explain the difference between a public and a private IP address?" And the candidate says, "A public IP is for the internet and a private one is for my local computer," but cannot explain NAT or the specific RFC 1918 ranges.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a gap in core network architecture knowledge. Understanding how devices on a private network communicate with the public internet is fundamental to concepts like network security monitoring and firewall configuration. 2. Inability to understand logs and alerts. Security logs are filled with IP addresses. An analyst must be able to immediately distinguish between an internal, private, and external, public, IP to assess the nature of a threat. 3. Reveals a lack of practical understanding. This concept is central to how nearly every home and corporate network is designed. Not knowing it suggests a purely theoretical knowledge base.
The high signal solution, explain the role, scope, and the bridge, NAT.
Answer: use a clear analogy and mention the key technologies. Say this: private IP addresses, defined by RFC 1918 ranges like 192.168.x.x or 10.x.x.x, are for use within a local network, like an office or your home. They are not routable on the public internet. Think of them as the individual office numbers within a large company building. A public IP address is a globally unique address assigned by an ISP, which is used for communication on the internet. It is like the building's main street address. The magic that connects them is NAT, or Network Address Translation. The router acts like the building's receptionist, taking all the outgoing traffic from the private IPS and sending it out using its single public IP, and then directing the return traffic to the correct private IP. This is crucial for both conserving IPv4 addresses and for security, as it hides the internal network structure from the outside world. Number 7. Not knowing what DHCP does.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, "What is DHCP?" and the candidate either does not know what the acronym stands for or just says, "It gives IP addresses to computers."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Demonstrates a lack of knowledge of essential network services. DHCP is a fundamental, ubiquitous service. Not knowing its function is a major red flag for any role that involves networks. 2. Shows an inability to troubleshoot common issues. A common help desk issue is, "I cannot connect to the network." One of the first steps is to check if the device has received a valid IP address from a DHCP server. 3. Misses critical security concepts. An attacker can set up a rogue DHCP server to perform man-in-the-middle attacks. Not understanding DHCP means you cannot understand this common attack vector.
The high signal solution, explain the purpose and the process, DORA.
Answer: define the purpose and then briefly explain the mechanism to show deeper knowledge. Say this: DHCP, the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, is a network management protocol that automates the assignment of IP addresses and other network configuration details, like the subnet mask and default gateway, to devices on a network. Its primary purpose is to prevent the need for manual IP configuration and to avoid IP address conflicts. It works using a four-step process known as DORA. The client discovers a DHCP server, the server makes an offer of an IP address, the client requests that IP address, and the server acknowledges the lease. From a security perspective, it is important to secure DHCP to prevent rogue servers from assigning malicious DNS servers or gateways to clients. Number 8. Not knowing what a firewall actually does.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, "What is the function of a firewall?" and the candidate gives a simplistic, non-technical answer like, "It stops hackers," or "It is a wall for your network."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a vague and inaccurate description. This answer lacks any technical substance and shows a movie-level understanding of a core security device. 2. Fails to mention the core mechanism, rules. The entire function of a firewall is based on its rule set. Not mentioning this is a critical omission. 3. Shows an inability to differentiate firewall types. This answer does not allow for any discussion of stateful versus stateless, network versus application, or next-generation firewalls.
The high-signal solution, define it by its core function, filtering by rules.
Answer. Explain its function with precision. Say this: a firewall is a network security device, either hardware or software, that acts as a filter for network traffic. Its core function is to monitor and control incoming and outgoing traffic based on a predefined set of security rules. At its most basic, it operates at layers 3 and 4, making decisions to permit or deny traffic based on source and destination IP addresses and port numbers. Modern stateful firewalls are more advanced. They track the state of active connections, which allows them to make more intelligent decisions. For example, a stateful firewall will allow return traffic from a web server you connected to, without needing a specific rule for that return traffic, because it knows you initiated the connection. They are the primary tool for enforcing network segmentation and are the first line of defense at the network perimeter. Number 9. Not knowing IDs versus IPS.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, "What's the difference between an IDs and an IPS?" and the candidate says, "They are pretty similar, they both look for intrusions," or they use the terms interchangeably.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is a classic, fundamental question. It is one of the most frequently asked questions to test a candidate's knowledge of security monitoring and prevention tools. Confusing them is a major error. 2. Misses the key difference, passive versus active. The entire point of the question is to see if the candidate understands the difference between detection and prevention. 3. Shows a lack of understanding of network architecture. The answer reveals whether the candidate understands the difference between a device that sits inline with traffic versus one that receives a copy of traffic.
The high-signal solution, use the detection versus prevention analogy.
Answer. Use a simple but powerful analogy to make the distinction crystal clear. Say this: the difference is best explained as detection versus prevention. An IDs, or intrusion detection system, is a passive monitoring tool. It is like a security camera system for your network. It watches the traffic, and if it sees something malicious that matches its signatures, it generates an alert for a security analyst to investigate, but it takes no action to stop the traffic itself. An IPS, or intrusion prevention system, is an active control. It is like a security guard standing in the doorway. Because it sits in line with the network traffic, it can not only detect malicious activity but can also take immediate action to block or drop the malicious packets before they reach their target. So, IDs alerts on a threat, while an IPS actively prevents it. Number 10. Not understanding what a proxy server is.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, "What is a proxy server?" and the candidate confuses it with a VPN, saying, "It is a tool to hide your IP address when you are on the internet."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of awareness of corporate network environments. Proxies are extremely common in enterprise settings for security, caching, and content filtering. This gap indicates the candidate has not researched how corporate networks function. 2. It is an incomplete answer, while a proxy can mask an IP, that is only one of its many functions. The answer misses the more common enterprise use cases. 3. Fails to differentiate between forward and reverse proxies. This distinction is critical for understanding web application architecture and security.
The high-signal solution, explain its role as an intermediary and differentiate the types.
Answer, show your depth by explaining the different roles a proxy can play. Say this, a proxy server acts as an intermediary for requests between clients and other servers. There are two main types. A forward proxy is used by clients within a network to access the internet. In a corporate environment, all employee traffic is routed through a forward proxy for security purposes like URL filtering to block malicious websites, for caching to save bandwidth, and to enforce access policies. The second type is a reverse proxy. This sits in front of web servers and accepts requests from the internet on behalf of those servers. It is used for critical functions like load balancing traffic across multiple servers, SSL termination to offload encryption tasks, and protecting the identity of the backend servers. So, a forward proxy protects the client, and a reverse proxy protects the server.
Please check description or comments section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
Number 11. Not understanding VPN basics.
The common mistake.
Answer, the interviewer asks, how does a VPN work? And the candidate gives a consumer-level answer like, it lets me watch Netflix from other countries, or, it makes my connection secure, without explaining the core concepts of tunneling and encryption.
Why this is a red flag. The impact.
1. Shows a lack of professional context. VPNs are a cornerstone of corporate remote access and network security. A purely consumer-focused answer demonstrates a failure to research enterprise use cases. 2. Misses the core technical mechanisms. The interviewer is testing for an understanding of tunneling, encryption, and secure protocols, not just the end-user benefit. 3. Inability to differentiate VPN types. This shallow answer does not allow for a discussion of the important differences between remote access VPNs and site-to-site VPNs.
The high-signal solution, explain the tunnel and encryption concepts.
Answer, focus on the 2 key technical functions that make a VPN work. Say this, a VPN, or virtual private network, creates a secure, private connection over a public network like the internet. It does this through 2 main functions. First, it creates a secure tunnel. This means it encapsulates the original data packets inside another packet, a process called tunneling, which hides the original source and destination. Second, and most importantly, it encrypts all the data within that tunnel. This makes the data completely unreadable to anyone who might intercept it, like an ISP or an attacker on a public Wi-Fi network. In a corporate setting, a remote access VPN allows employees to securely connect to the company's internal network from anywhere, as if they were physically in the office. This is crucial for accessing internal file servers and applications while ensuring data confidentiality. Number 12, mixing encryption versus hashing versus encoding.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, how should we store user passwords in a database, and the candidate incorrectly says, the passwords should be encrypted using a strong algorithm.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is a critical data protection error. Storing passwords with reversible encryption is a major security flaw. This mistake reveals a fundamental gap in understanding cryptographic principles for data at rest. 2. Shows an inability to differentiate core concepts. Encryption, hashing, and encoding have very different purposes. Confusing them is a classic mistake that interviewers specifically listen for. 3. Undermines trust in technical competence. This is a foundational concept in application security and data protection. Getting this wrong can make an interviewer doubt the candidate's entire technical skill set.
The high-signal solution, defined by reversibility and purpose.
Answer: clearly differentiate the three concepts by their purpose and whether they can be reversed. Say this: those three are often confused, but they have distinct purposes. Encryption is a two-way process used for confidentiality. You encrypt data with a key, and you can decrypt it later with the same or a different key. It is for protecting data that you need to read again later. Hashing is a one-way process used for integrity and password storage. It converts data into a fixed-length string, but you can never get the original data back. That's why we store password hashes. For login, we hash what the user types and compare it to the stored hash. Finally, encoding, like base64, is for data usability, not security. It is a two-way process that changes data into a standard format for safe transmission, but anyone can easily decode it. Number 13, unable to explain CIA triad.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, what is the CIA triad, and the candidate either does not know, or simply lists the three words, confidentiality, integrity, availability, without being able to define what each one means in a practical sense.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is the core model of information security. The CIA triad is the absolute cornerstone of the field. Not knowing it is the equivalent of an accountant not knowing what debits and credits are. 2. Shows a lack of a security mindset. The triad is the framework used to think about and categorize all security controls and risks. A candidate who cannot explain it has not developed this essential mindset. 3. Prevents deeper conversation. Nearly every security control, from firewalls to encryption, can be mapped back to one of the triad's principles. An inability to explain it stops the conversation cold.
The high-signal solution, define each principle and give a concrete example.
Answer: show your deep understanding by defining each part and linking it to a real-world security control. Say this: the CIA triad is the foundational model for information security, and it frames the primary goals of any security program. Confidentiality is about preventing the unauthorized disclosure of information. It is about ensuring that only the right people can see the data. A great example of a control that ensures confidentiality is encryption. Integrity is about maintaining the accuracy and completeness of data, ensuring it has not been altered without authorization. A control that ensures integrity is hashing, because if the data changes, the hash will change. Finally, availability is about ensuring that systems and data are accessible to authorized users when they need them. A control that ensures availability is having redundant servers or performing regular backups to protect against downtime or data loss. Number 14, confusing vulnerability, threat, and risk.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks for the definition of risk, and the candidate uses the words threat and vulnerability interchangeably, saying something like, risk is the threat of a vulnerability happening to the company.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. These terms are the language of risk management. Confusing them shows a fundamental misunderstanding of how security professionals assess and communicate problems. 2. It is a sign of an immature security mindset. Differentiating these concepts is a key step in moving from a purely technical focus to a risk-based approach to security. 3. Prevents effective communication. A professional needs to be able to clearly state, we need to patch this vulnerability because the threat from this ransomware group is high, creating a significant risk to the business. Confusing the terms makes this impossible.
The high-signal solution, use a simple analogy to define the relationship.
Answer. Use a clear, real-world analogy to show you understand how the three concepts are connected. Say this, I like to think of it using a house analogy. A vulnerability is a weakness. It is like having a window that does not lock properly. A threat is something or someone that could exploit that weakness. It is the burglar who is known to operate in the neighborhood. And risk is the potential for loss or damage when the threat exploits the vulnerability. It is the likelihood that the burglar will actually come through that unlocked window and steal your belongings. In cybersecurity, we cannot always control the threats, but we can manage risk by fixing our vulnerabilities, in this case, by fixing the lock on the window. Number 15, not understanding malware types, virus, worm, Trojan.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks for the difference between a virus and a worm, and the candidate says, they are both types of malware that infect computers, without being able to explain the key difference in their propagation method.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. These are foundational threat categories. As a security professional, you are expected to know the basic classifications of the threats you are supposed to be defending against. 2. Misses the key behavioral differences. The distinction between these malware types is all about their behavior, how they spread and how they infect. Not knowing this shows a lack of detailed knowledge. 3. Shows a lack of real-world awareness. High-profile attacks are often driven by specific malware types. For example, the WannaCry ransomware was spread by a worm. Not knowing these terms suggests the candidate does not follow industry news.
The high-signal solution, differentiate by propagation and intent.
Answer. Clearly define each type by its unique characteristic. Say this, while they are all types of malicious software, they are defined by how they spread and what they do. A virus requires a host file, like an executable, and needs human action to spread. When you run the infected program, the virus activates and attaches itself to other programs. A worm, on the other hand, is self-propagating. It exploits a vulnerability to spread across a network on its own, without any human interaction. This is what makes worms like WannaCry so dangerous and fast-spreading. A Trojan, or Trojan horse, is malware that disguises itself as a legitimate program. It tricks the user into installing it, and once it is running, it creates a backdoor for an attacker to gain access to the system. Number 16, not understanding phishing versus spear phishing versus whaling.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, what is the difference between phishing and spear phishing, and the candidate says, spear phishing is just a more advanced type of phishing, without explaining the critical element of targeting.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of nuance in threat intelligence. The difference is not about technical complexity, it is about the amount of reconnaissance and targeting involved. This is a key distinction in incident analysis. 2. It is a foundational social engineering concept. As this is one of the most common attack vectors, a security professional is expected to know the specific variations. 3. Misses the why. The distinction explains the attacker's motivation and sophistication. A generic phishing email is opportunistic. A whaling attack is a highly planned, strategic operation.
The high-signal solution, differentiate by the specificity of the target.
Answer. Use a clear analogy to define the difference by the target audience. Say this, the key difference between them is the level of targeting. Phishing is like a fisherman casting a wide net, it is a generic, mass email campaign sent to thousands of random users hoping a few will bite. Spear phishing is like fishing with a spear. The attacker specifically targets a person or a small group, using personalized information like their name, job title, or recent projects to make the email look much more convincing. Whaling is a specific type of spear phishing that targets high-value individuals, or big fish, like CEOs and CFOs. These attacks are highly customized and often aim to trick the executive into making large wire transfers or revealing sensitive corporate strategy. Number 17. No idea what DDoS is.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, "Can you explain what a DDoS attack is?" And the candidate confuses it with malware, saying, "It is a virus that takes down a website," failing to mention the concepts of traffic floods or botnets.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. DDoS is a primary threat to availability. Not understanding this attack means you are missing a key component of the CIA triad in practice. It is one of the most common and public-facing types of cyber attacks. 2. Fails to explain that a distributed aspect, the most important part of the term is distributed. Not being able to explain what this means is a critical failure. 3. Shows a lack of awareness of internet-scale threats. DDoS attacks operate at a scale that requires understanding concepts like botnets and traffic amplification, showing a candidate is thinking beyond a single computer.
The high-signal solution. Explain the goal, the method, and the distributed nature.
Answer. Focus on the core concept of overwhelming a target with traffic from many sources. Say this: a DDoS, or distributed denial of service attack, is a malicious attempt to make an online service, like a website or application, unavailable to legitimate users. The goal is to disrupt the service's availability. It works by overwhelming the target with a flood of internet traffic. The distributed part is key. The attacker uses a botnet, which is a network of thousands of compromised computers, to launch the attack simultaneously from all over the world. It is like trying to get into a shop, but the doorway is completely blocked by thousands of fake customers, so real customers cannot get in. The goal is not to steal data, but to shut the business down. Number 18. Not knowing the difference between authentication and authorization.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks for the difference, and the candidate says, they are both part of logging in and are used for security to make sure the right people access things.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is the absolute core of access control. Confusing these two concepts is a fundamental error that signals a deep lack of understanding of identity and access management, IAM. 2. It is a classic litmus test question. Interviewers ask this question specifically to see if a candidate has a precise, professional understanding of security terminology. 3. Shows an inability to design or analyze secure systems. You cannot talk about user permissions, roles, or the principle of least privilege if you do not understand the difference between these two concepts.
The high-signal solution. Use the who you are versus what you can do analogy.
Answer. Use the industry standard analogy because it is simple, clear, and perfectly accurate. Say this: this is a critical distinction in security. The easiest way to remember it is, authentication is the process of proving who you are, while authorization is the process of verifying what you are allowed to do. For example, when you log into your computer with a password, you are authenticating, proving your identity to the system. Once you are logged in, when you try to open a sensitive file, the system checks your permissions to see if you are allowed to view it. That second step is authorization. So, authentication comes first to verify your identity, and authorization comes second to check your permissions.
Conclusion for Chapter 1, Mastering the Foundations.
As we have just seen, these foundational concepts are non-negotiable. They are the language of cybersecurity. Answering these questions correctly with depth and practical examples proves to the interviewer that you have built a solid base of knowledge and are ready to learn about the more advanced tools and processes we are about to cover next.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario, based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
B. Tool-related mistakes. Number 19, saying, I have never used any cybersecurity tools.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, what kind of hands-on experience do you have with security tools? And the candidate replies, as a fresher, I have not had a chance to use any professional tools yet.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a critical lack of initiative. The internet is filled with powerful, free, and open-source security tools. This answer signals that the candidate has done zero practical exploration on their own and is waiting to be taught everything. 2. Indicates a purely theoretical knowledge base. It tells the interviewer that all their knowledge comes from books or videos, with no attempt to apply it. Companies hire for practical skills, not just theory. 3. Makes you an uncompetitive candidate. Many other freshers will have built home labs, participated in CTFs, or used tools like Wireshark and MAP. This answer instantly puts you behind other candidates who have demonstrated passion and curiosity.
The high signal solution. Reframe the question around your home lab and self-study.
Answer. You must demonstrate practical initiative, even without professional experience. Say this, while I do not have experience with enterprise tools in a production environment, I have been proactive in building a home lab to gain hands-on skills. I have used VirtualBox to create a small network with different operating systems. In that lab, I have used Wireshark to capture and analyze network traffic to understand protocols like the TCP handshake, MAP to perform basic network discovery and port scanning to identify open services, and I have even set up Security Onion to get a feel for how a SIM ingests and displays log data. This has been crucial for me to apply the foundational concepts I have learned in a practical setting. Number 20. Not knowing what a SIM is.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, what experience do you have with SIM platforms? And the candidate looks confused and says, I'm not familiar with that acronym, or gives a vague definition like, it's a tool that manages logs.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is an instant disqualifier for any SOC role. The SIM is the central nervous system and primary tool of every security operations center. Not knowing it is the equivalent of a pilot not knowing what a cockpit is. 2. Shows zero research into the target role. It immediately tells the interviewer that the candidate has not done the most basic research into the daily life or primary responsibilities of a security analyst. 3. Misses the core value proposition. The power of a SIM is not just log collection, it is aggregation, correlation, and alerting. A vague answer misses the entire point of the technology.
The high signal solution. Explain its purpose, function, and value.
Answer. Define the tool by the problem it solves, not just its technical function. Say this: a SIM, which stands for Security Information and Event Management, is the main platform a security analyst uses to get a unified view of an organization's security posture. Its purpose is to turn a massive amount of raw data into actionable intelligence. It does this by first ingesting and normalizing logs from thousands of sources like firewalls, servers, and applications. Then, its most critical function is correlation. It uses rules to analyze events from all those different sources to find suspicious patterns. For example, it could correlate a failed login from a user in one country with a successful login from the same user in another country minutes later, and generate a single, high-fidelity alert for an analyst to investigate. Number 21. Not knowing examples of SIM tools.
The common mistake.
Answer: after the candidate successfully defines what a SIM is, the interviewer follows up with, "Great. Which SIM tools are you familiar with?" and the candidate cannot name a single one.
Why this is a red flag: the impact.
1. Makes your knowledge seem purely academic. It suggests you read the definition in a textbook but never took the next step to see how it is applied in the real world. 2. Indicates a lack of industry awareness. Anyone who has read a few job descriptions for a SOC analyst role will see specific SIM tool names listed as requirements. Not knowing any suggests a lack of serious research. 3. A missed opportunity to show you are proactive. Naming a few tools, especially if you can differentiate them slightly, shows you are engaged with the industry and current technologies.
The high signal solution: be prepared with industry-leading and open-source examples.
Answer: demonstrate your awareness of the market. Say this: I'm aware of several of the major players in the SIM market. The industry leaders that I have seen in many job descriptions are Splunk, which is known for its extremely powerful search language and flexibility, IBM QRadar, which is often praised for its out-of-the-box rule sets and intelligence, and the cloud-native SIEMs like Microsoft Sentinel, which integrates very deeply with the Azure cloud ecosystem. To get some hands-on experience with the concepts, I have also explored open-source solutions like Security Onion, which packages tools like the ELK stack to provide SIM-like functionality. Number 22. Not understanding EDR or antivirus differences.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, what is the difference between a traditional antivirus and an EDR solution? And the candidate says, EDR is just a newer, more advanced version of antivirus.
Why this is a red flag: the impact.
1. Misses the fundamental shift in security strategy. The move from AV to EDR represents the industry's shift from a purely prevention-focused mindset to accepting that breaches will happen and focusing on detection and response. 2. It is technically inaccurate. While EDRs have AV components, their primary function and value are completely different. The answer shows an outdated understanding of modern endpoint security. 3. Shows you do not understand the response part. The R in EDR is critical. The answer fails to acknowledge the capabilities that allow analysts to actively investigate and remediate threats on an endpoint.
The high signal solution: differentiate by scope, prevention versus detection and response.
Answer: clearly articulate the strategic and functional differences. Say this: the key difference is their core philosophy and scope. A traditional antivirus is focused almost exclusively on prevention. It is a gatekeeper that uses signature-based detection to scan files and block known malware before it can execute. Its job is done at that point. An EDR, or Endpoint Detection and Response, solution has a much broader mission. It operates on the assumption that prevention will sometimes fail, so it focuses on real-time detection and active response. It continuously records endpoint activities, like process creation, network connections, and registry changes, and uses behavioral analysis to detect suspicious patterns. Its real power is that it gives analysts deep visibility to investigate an alert, hunt for threats, and the ability to remotely contain a compromised device, for example by isolating it from the network. Number 23. Assuming cybersecurity equals hacking tools.
The common mistake.
Answer: When asked about tools they are passionate about, especially for a defensive blue team role like a SOC analyst, the candidate only lists offensive tools like Metasploit, Burp Suite, and various tools from Kali Linux.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a mismatch with the role. It indicates a strong interest in offensive security, red team, while applying for a defensive security, blue team, job. It makes the interviewer question if the candidate will be happy or engaged with defensive work. 2. Reveals a narrow, Hollywood view of the field. It suggests the candidate thinks the most exciting part of cybersecurity is hacking, while ignoring the vast and complex world of defense, architecture, and compliance where the majority of jobs are. 3. Can come across as immature. While understanding the attacker's perspective is valuable, focusing solely on hacking tools without mentioning any defensive counterparts can signal a lack of professional maturity.
The high signal solution, acknowledge offense, but pivot to a defensive focus.
Answer. Show that you have a balanced perspective that is tailored to the role. Say this: while I find it valuable to understand offensive tools like those in Kali Linux to appreciate an attacker's mindset, my primary passion and focus for a defensive role like a SOC analyst are on the blue team tools. I have spent most of my self-study time learning how to use defensive tools effectively. For example, I have focused on getting comfortable with Wireshark to analyze malicious packet captures, using MAP not for attacks but for network discovery from a defender's perspective to find unauthorized open ports, and exploring SIM platforms like Security Onion to learn how to spot the traces that offensive tools leave behind. My goal is to master the tools that are used every day to protect and defend an organization. Number 24. Not understanding basic log analysis.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer presents a scenario: a user reports a suspicious email and you suspect their account is compromised. Where would you start looking? The candidate gives a generic answer like, I would check the logs, but cannot name a specific type of log or what they would be looking for.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Log analysis is the core skill of a security analyst. This is the number one daily task for most entry-level roles. An inability to discuss it practically is an immediate disqualifier. 2. Shows a lack of hands-on investigation skills. It suggests the candidate has never actually opened a log file or used a log viewer, indicating their knowledge is purely theoretical. 3. Demonstrates an inability to form a hypothesis. A good analyst knows what to look for. A vague answer shows they do not know how to even begin an investigation.
The high signal solution, propose a structured, log-specific investigation.
Answer. Show your methodical thought process by naming specific logs and event IDs. Say this: my investigation would start with the user's authentication logs to find evidence of a compromise. I would query our Active Directory or Cloud Identity Provider logs, looking specifically for key Windows event IDs. I would filter for event ID 4624, which indicates a successful logon, to see if there are any logins from unusual geographic locations or at odd hours. I would also search for a high volume of event ID 4625, which indicates failed logons, as that could signal a brute force attempt. After checking authentication, I would then examine the user's email server logs to trace the suspicious email and see if they clicked any links or if any unusual mail forwarding rules were created. Number 25. Not knowing packet capturing theory with Wireshark.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, if you see a suspicious alert from your IDs, how could you get more detail on the network traffic itself? And the candidate cannot name a packet capture tool or explain what a PCAP file is.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Wireshark is the industry standard for network analysis. Not knowing what it is, even in theory, is a major knowledge gap, equivalent to a writer not knowing what a word processor is. 2. Shows an inability to get to the ground truth. Logs provide a summary, but packet captures provide the absolute truth of what happened on the network. This answer shows an inability to perform deep dive analysis. 3. Indicates a lack of practical curiosity. Even freshers are expected to have downloaded Wireshark and captured their own network traffic out of sheer curiosity to see how things work.
The high-signal solution, explain its purpose as the ultimate source of truth.
Answer, even without professional experience, you must explain its function. Say this, for that scenario, the best way to get ground truth detail would be to analyze a packet capture, or PCAP, of the suspicious traffic using a tool like Wireshark. While an ID's alert tells you that something bad happened, Wireshark allows you to see the raw packets to understand how it happened. For example, if it was a web-based alert, I could use Wireshark to follow the TCP stream to reconstruct the exact conversation between the client and the server. This would allow me to see the full payload of the attack and determine if it was successful, something a log file often cannot provide. Number 26, saying burp suite equals hacking only, misconception.
The common mistake.
Answer, when applying for a defensive blue team role, the interviewer asks, "Are you familiar with burp suite?" and the candidate says, "Yes, that's a popular hacking tool used by pentesters."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a one-dimensional view of security. While its primary use is for offensive testing, this answer misses its immense value for defensive teams and developers. 2. Reinforces a potential role mismatch. It can strengthen the interviewer's suspicion that the candidate is more interested in being a hacker than a defender, making them a poor fit for a SOC analyst role. 3. Misses an opportunity to mention DevSecOps. It shows a lack of awareness of modern software development practices where security is integrated into the lifecycle.
The high-signal solution, show a balanced, professional understanding of its use.
Answer, acknowledge its primary function but pivot to its defensive value. Say this, yes, Burp Suite is best known as the primary tool for web application penetration testers to find and exploit vulnerabilities. However, it is also an incredibly valuable tool for defensive and development teams. For a blue team, we can use Burp Suite's repeater function to recreate and validate a potential attack that we see in our WAF logs. This helps us understand the true impact of the alert. For developers, it is a key part of the DevSecOps process, allowing them to test their own code for common vulnerabilities like SQL injection or cross-site scripting before it ever reaches production. So while it is an offensive tool, its insights are crucial for building and maintaining a strong defense. Number 27, not knowing vulnerability scanners, Nessus, Qualys.
The common mistake.
Answer, the interviewer asks, how would an organization proactively find weaknesses in its systems? And the candidate gives a manual answer like, they should check for missing patches and secure configurations on every server.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Demonstrates a complete lack of understanding of scale. A manual approach is impossible in any modern organization. This answer shows the candidate cannot think about enterprise-level problems. 2. Ignores a core domain of cybersecurity. Vulnerability management is a major function of most security teams. The primary tools for this function are automated scanners. 3. Shows a lack of industry knowledge. The candidate is unable to name the market-leading tools that are mentioned in almost every job description related to infrastructure security.
The high-signal solution, explain the role of automated scanners in the lifecycle.
Answer, show you understand the process and the tools that enable it. Say this, while manual checks are important, the only way for an organization to do that proactively and at scale is by using an automated vulnerability scanner. I'm familiar with the industry leaders like Tenable, Nessus and Qualys. These tools are the engine of a vulnerability management program. They work by scanning the network to discover all assets, and then they probe each device with thousands of checks to identify known vulnerabilities, CVEs, common misconfigurations, and missing patches. The scanner then generates a detailed report, which is the crucial first step. The security team uses this data to prioritize which vulnerabilities to fix first, typically based on the CVSS severity score and the business criticality of the affected system.
Conclusion for Chapter 2, Thinking Like a Practitioner.
The key takeaway for this chapter is that interviewers want to see that you have moved beyond textbook definitions. They want to know you have researched the tools of the trade, understand the problems they solve, and have taken the initiative to gain hands-on familiarity in a home lab. This practical mindset is what separates a candidate from a practitioner.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
See SOC Analyst and Incident Response Mistakes. Number 28. Not knowing what SOC is.
The common mistake.
Answer. The candidate is applying for a SOC Analyst role. The interviewer asks, in your own words, what is the primary mission of a SOC? And the candidate gives a vague answer like, it is the security department that keeps the company safe.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a complete lack of role-specific research. This is the most fundamental question for this role. A weak answer is an immediate sign that the candidate is unprepared and not serious about the position. 2. It is an inaccurate and incomplete definition. The answer fails to mention the core functions of monitoring, detection, and response, which are the entire reason a SOC exists. 3. Demonstrates no understanding of the operational tempo. A SOC is a high-tempo, operational environment. A generic answer suggests the candidate has no concept of the day-to-day realities of the job.
The high-signal solution, define it by its mission and core functions.
Answer. Use a professional, mission-oriented definition. Say this, a SOC, or Security Operations Center, is the centralized team responsible for the continuous monitoring, detection, analysis, and response to cybersecurity threats. Its primary mission is to protect the organization by identifying and neutralizing malicious activity before it can cause significant damage. It is the operational frontline of a security program, functioning 24/7 in many cases. The team uses a variety of tools, with the SIM at the center, to gain visibility across the entire organization, analyze security alerts, and coordinate the incident response process to contain and eradicate threats. Number 29. Not knowing L1 versus L2 duties.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, what is the difference between a Level 1 and a Level 2 SOC analyst? And the candidate says, a Level 2 is just more senior and experienced than a Level 1.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Fails to explain the functional differences. While seniority is a factor, the roles have distinct responsibilities and workflows. This answer shows a lack of understanding of the operational structure of a SOC. 2. Shows no awareness of the career path. Understanding the L1 to L2 progression is key for a fresher. It shows they have thought about their career growth and what skills they need to develop. 3. It is a low-effort answer. It does not demonstrate any real insight into how a security team actually functions and triages incidents.
The high-signal solution, differentiate by triage versus investigation.
Answer: clearly separate the roles by their primary function in the incident lifecycle. Say this: the key difference is the scope of their work, which can be summarized as triage versus deep investigation. A Level 1, L1, analyst is on the front lines. Their primary duty is to monitor the SIM for incoming alerts and perform initial triage. They use predefined playbooks to quickly determine if an alert is a false positive or a true incident that needs further attention. If it is a true incident, they escalate it. The Level 2, L2, analyst takes over from there. They are the investigators. They perform a much deeper analysis of the incident, using tools like EDR and packet captures to understand the full scope of the attack, the who, what, when, and how. They are responsible for the containment and remediation phases of the incident response process. Number 30, not knowing incident response steps.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, "Can you walk me through the phases of incident response?" and the candidate lists a few random actions like, "You should isolate the computer and then fix it."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of a structured, professional approach. Incident response is a formal, methodical process, not a chaotic scramble. This answer demonstrates an immature, ad hoc mindset. 2. Ignores industry standard frameworks. Frameworks like the one from NIST are the bedrock of modern incident response. Not knowing them is a major knowledge gap. 3. Critical steps are missed. A random answer will almost always miss crucial steps like preparation before an incident and lessons learned after, which are vital for continuous improvement.
The high-signal solution, name the phases of an industry standard framework, NIST.
Answer: show your professionalism by referencing a well-known framework. Say this: would follow the industry standard incident response lifecycle, such as the one defined by NIST. It consists of 4 main phases. The first is preparation, which is all the work you do before an incident happens, like having the right tools and trained staff. The second phase is detection and analysis, which is where the SOC identifies a potential incident and validates its severity. The third, and most active, phase is containment, eradication, and recovery. In this phase, you isolate the affected systems to stop the bleeding, remove the malware or attacker presence, and then restore the systems to normal operation. The final, and arguably most important, phase is post-incident activity, or lessons learned. This is where the team analyzes what went right and wrong to improve the security posture and be better prepared for the next incident. Number 31, unable to explain how to handle a phishing incident.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer gives a scenario. A user reports a phishing email they clicked on. What do you do? The candidate says, "I would tell them to delete the email and run an antivirus scan."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is a grossly inadequate response. This answer fails on every level. It does not investigate the impact, contain the threat, or prevent it from happening to others. 2. It destroys evidence. Telling the user to delete the email destroys the primary piece of evidence needed for analysis. 3. Shows a lack of a systematic approach. Phishing is the most common incident type. A candidate must have a clear, step-by-step plan for how to handle it.
The high-signal solution, provide a step-by-step triage and response plan.
Answer: walk the interviewer through a logical, professional process. Say this: this is a high-priority incident. My response would follow a clear plan. Step 1, containment. I would immediately ask the user to not touch the machine, and I would use our EDR tool to isolate the host from the network to prevent any potential malware from spreading. Step 2, preservation and analysis. I would instruct the user to forward the email to me as an attachment to preserve the headers, and then I would analyze those headers and any links or attachments in a secure sandbox. Step 3, scoping. I would use our SIM and email security gateway logs to search for the same email subject line or sender to see which other users in the organization received it. Step 4, eradication. If the email was malicious, I would use our security tools to delete all instances of it from every user's inbox. If the user's credentials were compromised, I would trigger an immediate password reset. Step 5. Communication. I would then report my findings and actions to the incident response lead. Number 32. Not knowing what alerts are.
The common mistake.
Answer. When asked about the daily job of a SOC analyst, the candidate talks about looking at logs but never uses the specific term alert or triage.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of familiarity with SOC terminology. Alert is the fundamental unit of work for a SOC analyst. Not using the correct term is like a software developer not knowing what a bug is. 2. Indicates a misunderstanding of the workflow. Analysts do not just stare at raw logs, they investigate the high-priority events that the SIM has promoted into an alert. 3. Makes the candidate sound unprofessional. Using the right vocabulary is a key way to show that you have done your research and can fit into a professional environment.
The high signal solution. Define an alert as the output of correlation.
Answer. Explain an alert as the specific, actionable output of the SIM. Say this. A SOC analyst's primary job is to investigate alerts. An alert is not just a log, it is a high-priority notification generated by the SIM when a set of predefined conditions in a correlation rule are met. For example, a single failed login is just a log and is not interesting. But a rule might be written to trigger an alert if there are 100 failed logins for a single user in 1 minute from 10 different countries. This correlation of individual log events is what creates the high-fidelity alert that tells an analyst, this is something you need to investigate right now. The first step is always to triage the alert to determine if it is a real threat. Number 33, saying, I don't know what SIM rules are.
The common mistake.
Answer. After explaining what a SIM is, the interviewer asks, can you give me an example of a SIM correlation rule, and the candidate cannot provide a single example.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows that the SIM knowledge is only a definition. This is the practical follow-up question. Failing it proves the candidate has only memorized the term, SIM, without understanding its core logic. 2. Reveals an inability to think like a defender. SIM rules are the embodiment of a defender's logic. They are the if-then statements that codify how to detect an attack. 3. A huge missed opportunity. Providing a good, practical example of a correlation rule is one of the best ways for a fresher to demonstrate a real security mindset.
The high signal solution. Provide a concrete if-then example.
Answer. Give a simple, logical example that connects events from different sources. Say this, absolutely. A SIM correlation rule is the logic that connects multiple, seemingly unrelated events to detect a larger pattern of attack. A classic example would be a brute force followed by successful login rule. The logic would be, if the firewall logs show 100 failed login attempts from a single IP address against our VPN in 5 minutes, and the Active Directory logs then show a successful login for that same username from that same IP address, then trigger a high-priority alert. This rule is powerful because it correlates data from 2 different log sources, the firewall and the domain controller, to identify a likely successful password-guessing attack. Number 34, not knowing use cases and correlation rules.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, what kind of threats would you expect to detect with a SIM, and the candidate gives a very generic answer like, you can detect hackers or malware.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of practical security mindset. A SOC does not just detect hackers. It detects specific, observable behaviors and techniques. This answer is far too vague and unprofessional. 2. Fails to connect threats to technology. The key skill is understanding how to translate a threat, like ransomware, into a detectable event, a specific log entry or pattern, that a SIM can find. 3. Indicates the candidate cannot think in terms of detection engineering. Modern security is about proactively developing detection use cases to find specific adversarial tactics. This answer shows no awareness of this discipline.
The high signal solution. Provide specific, actionable detection use cases.
Answer: give concrete examples of what you would build rules to detect. Say this: a SIM is powerful because you can build specific detection use cases with correlation rules to find threats at different stages of an attack. For initial access, a key use case is detecting password spraying attacks, where you would write a rule to alert on a high number of failed logins across many different usernames from a single IP address. For lateral movement, a great use case is detecting pass-the-hash attacks by creating a rule that looks for a user logging into multiple new systems in a short period of time with NTLM authentication. For data exfiltration, you could build a rule to detect an abnormally large amount of data being sent from an internal server to an external IP address, which could indicate theft. Number 35. Not understanding log sources.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, what are the most important log sources for a SOC to monitor, and the candidate says, all the logs are important, or can only name one type, like server logs.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of understanding of the visibility. The entire purpose of a SIM is to gain visibility. This answer shows the candidate does not know where that visibility comes from. 2. Demonstrates an inability to prioritize. While many logs are useful, some are absolutely critical for security monitoring. A good analyst knows which ones provide the highest value. 3. Reveals a gap in foundational knowledge. The candidate cannot connect security devices, like a firewall, to the data they produce, firewall logs.
The high signal solution: name the big three and explain the value of each.
Answer: show you understand the security value of different data types. Say this: for a SOC, there are 3 absolutely critical log sources that provide the foundation for visibility. First are firewall and proxy logs. These give us a view of all traffic entering and leaving the network, which is essential for detecting command and control traffic or data exfiltration. Second are endpoint logs, from an EDR or advanced antivirus. These are crucial because they tell us exactly what is happening on the user's machine, which processes are running, what registry keys are being modified, and what network connections are being made. Third are authentication logs, like from Windows Active Directory. These are the ground truth for who is logging in, from where, and whether they are successful. Correlating events from these 3 sources gives you a powerful view of most attacks. Number 36. Not knowing common incident types.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, besides phishing, what are some other common types of security incidents a SOC might handle, and the candidate struggles to name any other specific scenarios.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Indicates a very narrow view of the threat landscape. While phishing is common, it is only one of many incident types. This answer suggests the candidate has a limited understanding of what a SOC actually does. 2. Shows a lack of industry and news awareness. Anyone following cybersecurity news would be aware of major incidents involving ransomware, data breaches, or insider threats. 3. A missed opportunity to show breadth of knowledge. This is a chance to show that you understand different attack vectors and their impact, but a blank answer shuts down the conversation.
The high signal solution: list a diverse range of incident scenarios.
Answer: show your breadth of knowledge by naming several distinct types of incidents. Say this: absolutely. While phishing is a huge source of incidents, a SOC has to be prepared for a wide range of threats. Other common incident types include malware infection, where an analyst needs to investigate a host that has been compromised by a virus or Trojan; ransomware attack, which is a high-severity incident focused on containment and recovery; denial of service attack, where the team works to mitigate traffic floods to keep services online; insider threat, which involves investigating suspicious activity from an internal employee; and unauthorized access, where the team responds to an alert, indicating a user has accessed data or systems they are not permitted to. Number 37. Not knowing what a false positive is.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, what is a false positive and why is it a problem for a SOC, and the candidate is unable to define the term or explain its operational impact.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is a core operational concept for a SOC analyst. A huge portion of an L1 analyst's job is dealing with false positives. Not knowing the term means you do not understand the daily reality of the role. 2. Shows a lack of understanding of alert fatigue. The answer fails to grasp one of the biggest challenges in any security operations team, the risk of being overwhelmed by meaningless alerts. 3. Reveals an inability to think about tuning and optimization. A key skill for analysts is to provide feedback to tune SIM rules to reduce false positives. This answer shows no awareness of this crucial feedback loop.
The high signal solution, define the term and explain its impact on the team.
Answer. Define it clearly and then explain the business problem it creates. Say this: a false positive is an alert that is triggered by the SIM or another security tool that, upon investigation, turns out to be benign, legitimate activity and not a real security incident. It is a false alarm. False positives are a major problem for a SOC because they create alert fatigue. If analysts spend 99% of their day chasing down false alarms, their attention is diverted from the one alert that might be a genuine, critical attack. It burns out the team and can lead to real threats being missed. A key part of an analyst's job is to carefully document false positives so that the SIM engineers can tune the detection rules to make them more precise and reduce the noise, allowing the team to focus on what really matters. Number 38, unable to explain the malware infection process at a high level.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, a user clicks a malicious link and their machine gets infected with malware. Can you walk me through the typical stages of what happens next? The candidate gives a jumbled answer, mixing up different stages of an attack.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows an inability to think in terms of a kill chain. Modern defense is based on understanding the sequential stages of an attack. This answer shows a lack of a structured, phase-based mindset. 2. It is a foundational concept for investigation. An analyst needs to be able to identify which stage an attack is in to determine the appropriate response. For example, the response to initial infection is very different from the response to data exfiltration. 3. Demonstrates a lack of knowledge of common malware behaviors. The answer fails to mention key actions that most malware takes post-infection, like establishing persistence or C2 communication.
The high signal solution, walk through a simplified cyber kill chain.
Answer. Show your structured thinking by outlining the logical progression of an infection. Say this: absolutely. After the initial infection, which was the user clicking the link, the malware follows a logical series of steps, often called a kill chain. The first is usually execution, where the malicious code runs on the machine. Immediately after, it will try to establish persistence, which means it will modify the system, for example by creating a scheduled task or a registry key, so that it will automatically restart even if the machine is rebooted. The next critical step is command and control, or C2. The malware will call home to the attacker's server to receive further instructions. After that, the attacker might perform lateral movement to spread to other machines on the network, and finally, achieve their objective, which could be data exfiltration or deploying ransomware. As a defender, our goal is to detect and stop this chain as early as possible.
Conclusion for Chapter 3, The Analyst's Mindset.
As we have covered, succeeding in a SOC interview requires more than just knowing definitions. It requires demonstrating a structured, operational mindset. You need to show that you can think in terms of frameworks, follow a process, and connect individual alerts to the bigger picture of an attack. This practical, methodical approach is what interviewers are looking for in a future analyst.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
D. Cloud security and modern concepts. Number 39. Not knowing basics of cloud models, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, "Can you explain the difference between IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS?" And the candidate says, "They are just different ways of using the cloud," or confuses which service manages which part of the stack.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is a foundational cloud computing concept. In today's world, nearly every company uses the cloud. Not knowing these basic service models is a major gap in modern IT knowledge. 2. Shows an inability to understand security boundaries. The entire concept of cloud security is based on understanding who is responsible for what. This answer shows the candidate cannot make that distinction. 3. Demonstrates a lack of research into modern infrastructure. It signals that the candidate's knowledge might be stuck in the on-premises world, making them a poor fit for a company with a cloud presence.
The high signal solution. Use the pizza as a service analogy.
Answer. Use the well-known and perfectly clear pizza as a service analogy to demonstrate your understanding. Say this: IaaS, or infrastructure as a service, is like buying the raw ingredients, flour, yeast, toppings, and using the store's oven to make the pizza yourself. The cloud provider gives you the fundamental building blocks like virtual machines, the oven, and storage, but you are responsible for managing everything else, including the operating system and the application. PaaS, or platform as a service, is like ordering a pizza for delivery. You do not manage the kitchen or the ingredients, you just get a ready-made platform to put your own toppings on. The provider manages the OS and runtime, and you just manage your application and data. SaaS, or software as a service, is like dining out at a restaurant. You do not manage anything, you just consume the finished product. This is like using a service like Gmail or Salesforce, where the provider manages the entire stack from top to bottom. Number 40. Not knowing AWS or Azure security responsibilities.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks, if we deploy a virtual machine in AWS, who is responsible for patching the operating system, and the candidate incorrectly says, that would be Amazon's responsibility.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is a critical, real-world security error. Misunderstanding this responsibility is how major cloud breaches happen. This answer is not just wrong, it is dangerously wrong. 2. It directly contradicts the shared responsibility model. It shows the candidate has not learned the number 1 rule of cloud security. 3. Reveals a complete lack of practical cloud knowledge. Anyone who has spent even a small amount of time studying for a basic cloud certification knows this distinction. It is a sign of zero practical study.
The high signal solution. Clearly state the customer's responsibility in IaaS.
Answer. Answer directly and confidently. referencing the core cloud security principle. Say this, that is a classic example of the shared responsibility model. In an IaaS model like deploying an EC2 virtual machine in AWS, the customer is 100% responsible for patching the guest operating system. AWS is responsible for the security of the cloud, the physical data centers, the hardware, the virtualization layer, but the customer is responsible for security in the cloud. This includes everything from patching the Windows or Linux OS to configuring the security groups, the firewall, managing IAM permissions, and encrypting their data. So, in that scenario, it is our responsibility as the customer to perform the patching. Number 41, not knowing the shared responsibility model.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks the candidate to explain the shared responsibility model, and the candidate gives a vague answer like, it means the cloud provider and the customer both have to do security.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is the single most important concept in cloud security. A vague answer here is a major failure. It is the foundation upon which all other cloud security principles are built. 2. Shows an inability to define clear boundaries. The entire point of the model is to draw a clear line of who is responsible for which specific security tasks. A fuzzy answer defeats the purpose. 3. Prevents any meaningful discussion of cloud controls. You cannot talk about configuring security groups or IAM if you do not first understand that these are the customer's responsibility under this model.
The high signal solution, use the security of the cloud versus security in the cloud framework.
Answer: use the official, industry standard language to show you know the concept precisely. Say this, the shared responsibility model is the framework that defines the security obligations of the cloud provider versus the customer. The easiest way to remember it is the phrase, the provider is responsible for the security of the cloud, while the customer is responsible for security in the cloud. Security of the cloud means the provider, like AWS or Azure, is responsible for protecting the physical infrastructure, the data centers, the servers, the networking, and the hypervisor. Security in the cloud means the customer is responsible for everything they put on that infrastructure. This always includes their data, user access, and permissions. Depending on the service model, IaaS, PaaS, or SaaS, the customer's level of responsibility changes, but they are always responsible for their data and their users. Number 42, confusing IAM, cloud, with IAM, corporate identity management.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, what is IAM, and the candidate only gives the on-premises definition. It is about managing employee user accounts with Active Directory, failing to mention its role in the cloud.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of cloud-specific knowledge. While the concepts are related, IAM in AWS or Azure is a specific service with unique components like roles, policies, and service principles that have no direct equivalent in traditional on-prem IAM. 2. It is a technically incomplete answer. Cloud IAM governs not just human users, but also permissions for services and applications to interact with each other, which is a critical concept. 3. Indicates the candidate cannot bridge the gap between on-prem and cloud. In a hybrid world, a security professional must be able to understand and articulate both.
The high signal solution, define the general concept, then differentiate the cloud implementation.
Answer: show that you understand both worlds and can distinguish between them. Say this, IAM as a general concept stands for Identity and Access Management, and it is the security discipline that ensures the right entities have the right access to the right resources at the right time. In a traditional corporate environment, this is often managed by a service like Microsoft Active Directory, focusing on human user accounts and their access to corporate applications. In the cloud, like AWS IAM, the concept is much broader. It still manages human users, but critically, it also manages identities and permissions for services and resources. For example, you use an IAM role to grant an EC2 virtual machine the specific permission to read data from an S3 bucket, without needing to store any secret keys on the machine itself. This ability to manage machine and service identities is a key differentiator of cloud IAM. Number 43, not knowing zero trust basics.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, "What does zero trust mean to you?" and the candidate says, "It means you do not trust anyone," or "It means using a lot of firewalls."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of awareness of modern security strategy. Zero trust is the dominant security model and strategic direction for the entire industry. Not knowing its core principle is a major gap. 2. It is a vague, buzzword-level answer. This response shows the candidate has heard the term but has no understanding of the principles or technologies that enable it. 3. Misses the shift from a castle and moat mentality. The answer fails to explain the key evolution from a perimeter-based security model to an identity-based one.
The high signal solution. Explain the core mantra and its implications.
Answer: define the concept by its famous mantra and explain what it replaces. Say this: zero trust is a modern security strategy, not a single product. Its core principle is summed up in the mantra: never trust, always verify. It is a complete shift away from the old castle and moat model where we trusted everything inside our network perimeter and distrusted everything outside. In a zero trust model, we assume the network is already compromised. Therefore, trust is never granted implicitly based on location. Instead, we must explicitly verify every single access request, no matter where it is coming from. This means we authenticate and authorize not just the user, but also the device health and the context of the request before granting access to an application. It is about moving from a network-centric to an identity-centric approach to security. Number 44, not knowing MFA.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, "What is MFA and why is it important?" and the candidate says, "It is when you get a code on your phone to log in. It is for better security."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a technically weak and incomplete definition. While the example is correct, the answer fails to explain the underlying security principle of using multiple factor types, which is the entire point of MFA. 2. Shows a lack of professional depth. This is a consumer-level understanding. A security professional needs to be able to articulate the why behind the control, not just describe the user experience. 3. Misses the opportunity to discuss risk reduction. The answer does not explain what specific, critical risk MFA is designed to mitigate: the risk of compromised passwords.
The high signal solution. Define it by the authentication factor types.
Answer: show your professional understanding by explaining the framework behind MFA. Say this: MFA, or multi-factor authentication, is a critical security control that requires a user to provide 2 or more different types of evidence, or factors, to prove their identity. It is important because it defends against the risk of compromised passwords. Even if an attacker steals your password, they cannot log in without the other factors. There are 3 main types of factors: something you know, like a password or a PIN. Something you have, like a physical token or an authenticator app on your phone. And something you are, like a fingerprint or facial recognition. A proper MFA implementation requires using at least 2 of these different categories, which is why just having a password and a PIN is not true MFA, but having a password and a code from your phone is. Number 45, not knowing SSO versus federation.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, "Can you explain single sign-on?" and the candidate says, "It is when you can use one password to log into a bunch of different apps, but cannot differentiate it from federation."
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a surface-level understanding of modern identity. SSO is the user experience, but federation is the underlying technology that often enables it, especially across different organizations. Confusing them is a common but telling mistake. 2. It is a technically imprecise answer. While the outcome is similar for the user, the architectural implementation and trust relationships are completely different. 3. Fails to mention key protocols. A professional answer should involve mentioning the key protocols that make federation possible, like SAML or OpenID Connect.
The high signal solution. Define SSO as the goal and federation as the method.
Answer: clearly separate the what from the how. Say this, that's a great question because they are closely related but distinct. Single sign-on, SSO, is the goal or user experience, the idea that a user can log in once to a central system and then access multiple different applications without needing to log into each one individually. Federation, or federated identity, is one of the primary methods used to achieve SSO, especially between different companies or trust domains. Federation works by establishing a trust relationship between an identity provider, like Azure Active Directory, and a service provider, like Salesforce. When a user tries to access Salesforce, it redirects them to Azure AD to authenticate. Azure AD confirms the user's identity and sends back a secure token, often using a protocol like SAML. Salesforce trusts that token and grants the user access. So, federation is the underlying trust architecture that makes SSO possible across organizational boundaries. Number 46, not understanding data classification.
The common mistake.
Answer, the interviewer asks, why is data classification important for security, and the candidate gives a generic answer like, it is important to organize your data so you know where it is.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Misses the entire point of the security control. Data classification is not about organization, it is about applying the appropriate level of protection based on the data's sensitivity and value. 2. Shows an inability to think about risk and prioritization. This answer fails to grasp that not all data is created equal. A company should spend more resources protecting its intellectual property than its public marketing materials. 3. Demonstrates a lack of awareness of compliance and governance. Many regulations, like GDPR and HIPAA, have strict requirements for how sensitive data is handled, and classification is the first step in meeting those requirements.
The high signal solution, explain it as the foundation for all other controls.
Answer, frame it as the essential first step that informs all other security decisions. Say this, data classification is the process of categorizing data based on its sensitivity, criticality, and business value. It is arguably the foundational step for an entire security program, because you cannot protect what you do not understand. The primary goal is to ensure that the level of security control we apply is appropriate for the data's value. For example, we might classify data into tiers like public, internal, confidential, and restricted. Data classified as public might require no special protection, but data classified as restricted, like customer financial data or source code, would be subject to the most stringent controls, including strong encryption, strict access control, and robust logging. Without classification, you either overspend by protecting everything, or underspend and leave your most critical assets exposed.
Conclusion for Chapter 4, Speaking the Language of Modern Security.
Mastering these modern concepts, from the shared responsibility model in the cloud to the principles of zero trust, is what separates a forward-looking candidate from one with outdated knowledge. These are not just buzzwords, they are the strategic frameworks that guide how modern businesses operate securely. Demonstrating a clear understanding of them proves you are ready to contribute to a modern security program.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving. Interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer. System design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
Knowledge presentation mistakes.
This next chapter is one of the most important. Many freshers have the right technical knowledge but fail the interview because of how they present it. These mistakes are about communication, confidence, and strategy. Mastering your presentation can be the difference between a rejection and an offer, even if your technical skills are the same as another candidate's. Number 47, memorizing definitions instead of understanding.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, "What is a firewall?" and the candidate recites a perfect, word-for-word definition from a textbook or website. When the interviewer follows up with, "Okay, can you give me an example of a rule you might create on a firewall?" the candidate freezes because their knowledge ends at the definition.
Why this is a red flag. The impact.
1. It is a clear sign of rote learning, not true comprehension. Interviewers are trained to spot this. A memorized definition without the ability to apply it is a sign of shallow knowledge. 2. Shows an inability to problem solve. The job will require applying concepts to new situations, not reciting facts. This mistake shows the candidate is not ready for that. 3. Makes the interviewer distrust all your other answers. Once an interviewer suspects one answer is memorized, they will begin to doubt the authenticity of all your other answers, even if they are correct.
The high signal solution. Always answer in your own words and include an example.
Answer: the best way to avoid this is to create a personal rule for yourself. Never give a definition without immediately following it with a practical example. Instead of just defining a firewall, say, "A firewall is a filter for network traffic that works based on a set of rules." For example, a very common rule for a web server would be to create a rule that says, "Allow all inbound traffic on TCP port 443 from any source IP," and then, right below that, have a rule that says, "Deny all other traffic." This ensures the server can only receive HTTPS traffic, which is its intended function. Number 48, giving robotic answers.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate answers every question in a flat, monotone voice, with the same pace and tone, regardless of the question's complexity. Their answers sound rehearsed and lack any genuine engagement or enthusiasm.
Why this is a red flag. The impact.
1. It prevents a human connection. Interviews are about building rapport. A robotic delivery makes it very difficult for the interviewer to connect with you or get a sense of your personality. 2. Can be interpreted as a lack of passion. Even if you are passionate about the subject, a monotone delivery can be perceived as disinterest, which makes the interviewer question your motivation for the role. 3. It makes your answers less memorable. An engaged, conversational answer is far more likely to stick in the interviewer's mind than a robotic one.
The high signal solution. Practice speaking, not just memorizing.
Answer: the solution is to practice talking about these concepts out loud, as if you were explaining them to a friend. Record yourself on your phone and listen back. Are you varying your tone? Do you sound interested? Another great technique is to use transition phrases that make your answers more conversational. Instead of just launching into a definition, start with phrases like, "That's a great question, the way I like to think about it is." Or, "Absolutely, in my experience." This forces you into a more natural, conversational mode. Number 49, not giving examples.
The common mistake.
Answer: this is a recurring theme. The interviewer asks, "What is a false positive?" The candidate correctly defines it. It is an alert that turns out to be benign activity. The interviewer then has to prompt them, okay, can you give me an example?
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is the single biggest sign of theoretical versus practical knowledge. The ability to provide a concrete example is the ultimate proof that you truly understand a concept. 2. Forces the interviewer to do more work. Making the interviewer constantly ask for clarification is exhausting and reflects poorly on your communication skills. 3. A huge missed opportunity to shine. A great example can turn a good answer into a fantastic one. It is your chance to show you have thought deeply about the subject.
The high signal solution, build a mental library of examples.
Answer: for every single concept you study, you must also find or create a simple, real-world example. For a false positive, be prepared to say, a classic example of a false positive is when a vulnerability scanner, which is a legitimate and authorized tool, performs a scan of our network. The intrusion detection system might see this activity as a malicious scan and generate a high-priority alert. A SOC analyst would then have to investigate, see that the source IP belongs to our internal scanner, and close the alert as a false positive. We would then work to tune the IDs to whitelist that scanner's IP address to prevent the alert from firing in the future. Number 50. Over-explaining simple questions.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks a simple, direct question like, what does the acronym CIA stand for in the CIA triad? And the candidate launches into a 5-minute lecture explaining the entire history of the model, giving multiple examples for each principle, and discussing its modern implications.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows an inability to listen and be direct. The interviewer asked a simple question, and you failed to provide a simple answer. This can be frustrating and can derail the interview's pacing. 2. Can come across as arrogant. It can seem like you are trying to show off how much you know rather than having a professional, two-way conversation. 3. It wastes precious time. Interviews have a limited amount of time. Wasting 5 minutes on a simple definition means the interviewer has less time to ask you the more complex, scenario-based questions where you can truly shine.
The high signal solution, answer the question directly, then pause.
Answer: follow a simple rule, answer exactly what was asked, then stop and wait for the follow-up. For the example question, the perfect answer is, it stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Then, simply pause. This shows confidence and respect for the interviewer's time. If they want more detail, they will ask, great. Can you explain what integrity means in that context? By pausing, you give the interviewer control of the conversation and demonstrate that you are a precise and effective communicator. Number 51. Giving long, unstructured answers.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks a multi-part question like, can you explain the difference between IDs and IPS and where you would place them in a network? The candidate starts talking, rambling from one point to the next, mixing up the definitions and the placement, and ultimately never giving a clear, organized answer.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a disorganized thought process. If you cannot structure your thoughts to answer a question, the interviewer will assume you cannot structure your thoughts to solve a real-world security problem. 2. Makes your answer hard to follow and remember. The interviewer has to work hard just to understand your point. A confusing answer is an unforgettable answer. 3. Suggests poor communication skills. Clear, concise communication is a critical soft skill. This mistake signals a major weakness in that area.
The high signal solution, use a top-down communication approach.
Answer: before you dive into details, state the structure of your answer first. Say this, absolutely. I will break that down into 2 parts. First, the core difference between them, and second, their typical network placement. First, the difference. An IDs is a passive detection system, like a security camera, while an IPS is an active prevention system, like a security guard. Second, their placement. Because an IDs is passive, it sits out of band, receiving a copy of the traffic. An IPS, however, must sit in line with the traffic, typically right behind the firewall, so it can actively block malicious packets before they reach the internal network. This structure makes your answer clear, confident, and easy to understand. Number 52, not using the STAR method in scenario questions.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks a behavioral question. Tell me about a time you had to solve a difficult technical problem. The candidate gives a vague, wandering story without a clear beginning, middle, or end, and fails to specify what their personal contribution was or what the result was.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is a direct failure to follow a standard interview protocol. The STAR method is the expected format for behavioral questions. Not using it shows a lack of preparation and interview savvy. 2. Your answer lacks impact. Without a clear structure, the story loses its power. The interviewer is left unsure what the problem was, what you did, and why it mattered. 3. Fails to highlight your specific contributions. A common failure is to talk about what the team did. The STAR method forces you to focus on the action you specifically took.
The high signal solution: prepare your stories in the STAR format beforehand.
Answer: the solution is preparation. For common behavioral questions, write out your answers in the STAR format. Situation: in my university capstone project, our team's web server was experiencing slow performance. Task: my specific task was to identify the root cause of the latency. Action: I used Wireshark to capture traffic and noticed a high volume of DNS requests. I then analyzed the server's configuration and discovered that its DNS cache was misconfigured and too small, causing it to constantly requery for the same addresses. Result: after I corrected the configuration and increased the cache size, the server's page load times decreased by 40%, which was a key factor in our project's success. This structure is clear, concise, and powerfully demonstrates your skills. Number 53, pausing too long or panicking under pressure.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks a tough, unexpected question. The candidate's eyes widen, they go silent for a very long, awkward 10 seconds, and then give a flustered, unconfident answer.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows an inability to handle stress. Cybersecurity is a field where you will be put under immense pressure during a real incident. An interview is a small test of that, and panicking is a bad sign. 2. It breaks the flow and rapport of the interview. A long, silent panic creates an awkward atmosphere that can be hard to recover from. 3. Undermines your credibility. Even if you eventually give a good answer, the initial panic makes you seem less confident and knowledgeable.
The high signal solution: use a buffer phrase to buy yourself time.
Answer: it is perfectly acceptable to take a moment to think. The key is to manage that moment professionally instead of silently panicking. Have a go-to buffer phrase ready. When you get a tough question, smile, nod, and calmly say, "That's a great question. Let me take a moment to structure my thoughts on that." This does two things: it shows the interviewer you are thoughtful and not impulsive, and it gives you a comfortable 5 to 10 seconds to actually think without any awkward silence. It projects confidence and control, even when you are stumped. Number 54, not admitting, "I don't know," when they don't know.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks about a specific, niche technology the candidate has never heard of. Instead of admitting it, the candidate tries to bluff their way through, giving a vague, rambling, and incorrect answer.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It instantly destroys your credibility. Bluffing is incredibly easy to spot, and it is a major sign of dishonesty and insecurity. An interviewer would rather hire someone who is honest about their gaps than someone who tries to deceive them. 2. Shows a lack of professional integrity. Insecurity, integrity is paramount. Being willing to make things up is a huge character flaw. 3. A missed opportunity to show a growth mindset. This is a chance to show you are coachable and eager to learn, but bluffing turns it into a negative.
The high signal solution: use the admit, reframe, and show eagerness method.
Answer: this is the most professional way to handle this situation. First, admit it clearly and confidently. "I have to be honest, that's not a technology one have had exposure to yet, so I cannot speak to it in detail. Next, try to reframe it with what you do know. Based on the name, it sounds like it might be a type of container security tool, which is an area I'm actively learning about. Finally, show eagerness to learn. I have made a note of it and I'm definitely going to research it after this call. I'm always looking to expand my knowledge. This answer turns a potential weakness into a demonstration of honesty, logical thinking, and a strong desire to learn.
Conclusion for Chapter 5: How you answer is as important as what you answer.
Ultimately, these presentation mistakes all point to one thing: confidence and communication. Your technical knowledge can be perfect, but if you cannot present it in a structured, confident, and professional way, its impact is lost. By practicing how to structure your answers, manage pressure, and communicate with integrity, you are building the soft skills that will truly set you apart as a professional.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section. These questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
F. Resume-related mistakes.
Before you even get to the interview, your resume is your first impression. The mistakes in this chapter are critical because they can prevent you from even getting a chance to speak to a hiring manager. These are not just typos, these are strategic errors that undermine your credibility from the very beginning. Let's cover how to ensure your resume is a powerful and honest representation of your skills. Number 55, adding skills you cannot explain.
The common mistake.
Answer: a candidate lists Python as a skill on their resume. In the interview, the hiring manager asks, "Great, I see you have Python experience. Can you tell me about how you have used it for a security-related task?" The candidate then admits, "Oh, I only took one introductory course and have not really built anything with it."
Why this is a red flag. The impact.
1. It is a form of deception and instantly destroys trust. The interviewer now questions every single skill listed on your resume. If you exaggerated about this, what else is not true? Your credibility is immediately damaged. 2. Shows a lack of professional integrity. It demonstrates a say anything to get the job attitude, which is a major character flaw in a field like cybersecurity that is built on trust and integrity. 3. It guarantees an uncomfortable and failed interview. The interviewer will likely continue to probe on the skills you listed, leading to a series of embarrassing admissions that you cannot recover from.
The high signal solution. Follow the 1-minute rule.
Answer: the rule is simple. If you cannot talk about a skill or technology confidently for at least 1 minute, it does not belong on your resume. Instead of listing a skill you are only vaguely familiar with, be more honest and specific. It is much better to have a smaller, more defensible skills section. For example, instead of just Python, you could write Python, familiarity with scripting for basic automation tasks. This sets an honest expectation and prevents the interviewer from asking you a complex question you cannot answer. Honesty is always the better strategy. Number 56, writing fake project experience.
The common mistake.
Answer: a candidate, wanting to look more impressive, completely fabricates a project on their resume, for instance, developed a machine learning model to detect network intrusions. When the interviewer, who has experience in that area, starts asking detailed questions about the algorithms, data sets, and feature engineering, the candidate's story completely falls apart.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is an absolute deal-breaker and grounds for immediate rejection. This is not just an exaggeration, it is a lie. No credible company will hire a candidate who is dishonest about their work. You will likely be blacklisted. 2. It is incredibly easy for an experienced interviewer to expose. A few simple, probing questions are all it takes to unravel a fake project. The interviewer knows exactly what to ask to test the depth of your knowledge. 3. Shows a profound lack of ethics. In a field responsible for protecting a company's most sensitive assets, a lack of ethics is the single biggest disqualifying factor.
The high signal solution: document and be proud of your real projects.
Answer: it is 1,000 times better to have a simple, real project that you can talk about with passion and detail than a complex, fake one. Even a small project, like set up a home lab in VirtualBox with a pfSense firewall to segment a network and wrote custom rules to block specific traffic, is incredibly valuable. Why? Because it is real. You can talk about the challenges you faced, what you learned, and the specific steps you took. Authenticity and a demonstrated willingness to learn will always be more impressive than a fabricated achievement. Number 57. Copying resume lines from ChatGPT or the Internet.
The common mistake.
Answer: a candidate's resume is filled with generic, buzzword-heavy bullet points that sound impressive but lack substance, such as, leveraged synergistic threat intelligence paradigms to proactively mitigate emerging cyber threats.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Your resume sounds generic and inauthentic. Recruiters and hiring managers read hundreds of resumes. They can instantly spot the generic, copied and pasted lines that countless other candidates are using. 2. It shows you cannot articulate your own accomplishments. If you cannot describe what you did in your own words, it suggests you either did not do it or did not understand its value. 3. Creates a mismatch in the interview. When you are asked to elaborate on a buzzword-filled bullet point and cannot provide a clear, simple explanation, it becomes obvious that the words on the resume are not your own.
The high signal solution: use a simple action verb plus what you did plus result formula.
Answer: write your resume in clear, simple, and powerful language. Use a straightforward formula for your bullet points. For example, instead of the generic buzzword sentence, write, analyzed firewall logs using Splunk to identify a suspicious IP address communicating with an internal server. Resulted in the creation of a new firewall rule that blocked the malicious traffic and a report that was escalated to the incident response team. This is specific, it shows your actions, and it demonstrates a clear result. It is authentic and far more powerful. Number 58. No cybersecurity-related project at all.
The common mistake.
Answer: a fresher's resume lists their education and maybe some unrelated part-time work, but contains absolutely no personal projects, home lab experience, CTF participation, or anything that demonstrates a proactive interest in the field.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It signals a lack of passion and initiative. Cybersecurity is a competitive field. Companies want to hire people who are genuinely passionate and curious, not just people who want a job. A lack of projects is the biggest sign of low initiative. 2. Provides no talking points for the interview. Projects are the best way for a fresher to demonstrate their skills. Without any, the interview is limited to purely theoretical questions, making it very hard for you to stand out. 3. Makes your resume identical to hundreds of others. your resume will look exactly the same as every other candidate who has the same degree but has also put in no extra effort. You will not get noticed.
The high signal solution: build something, anything, and document it.
Answer: you absolutely must have at least one project. It does not need to be complex. The goal is to demonstrate learning and initiative. Some excellent starter projects are setting up a home lab with VirtualBox, pfSense, and a vulnerable VM like Metasploitable 2. Participating in a CTF on a site like TryHackMe or HackTheBox and writing a blog post about how you solved a challenge. Building a simple Python script to automate a security task, like checking a list of domains against a threat intelligence feed. Pick one, do it, and write about it clearly on your resume. This is the single most effective thing you can do to get an interview. Number 59, too much irrelevant information.
The common mistake.
Answer: a fresher's resume for a SOC analyst role is 2 pages long and includes detailed descriptions of their high school achievements, part-time jobs in retail or food service, and a long list of hobbies that have no connection to technology or analytics.
Why this is a red flag: the impact.
1. Shows a lack of professional judgment. It demonstrates that the candidate does not understand what is and is not relevant for a professional role. Recruiters spend only seconds on each resume. You are burying the important information in noise. 2. It dilutes your key strengths. Every irrelevant line you add takes attention away from the skills and projects that actually matter for a cybersecurity job. 3. Can make you seem unfocused. A cluttered resume suggests a cluttered mind. It fails to present a clear, concise narrative of why you are a good fit for this specific career path.
The high signal solution: be ruthless and keep it to 1 page.
Answer: for a fresher, your resume should never be more than 1 page. The solution is to be ruthless in your editing. For every single line on your resume, ask yourself the question: does this directly support my case for getting a cybersecurity job? If the answer is no, remove it. For non-technical jobs, you can still include them, but summarize them brutally. Instead of 5 bullet points about your barista job, use 1, develop strong customer service and communication skills in a fast-paced retail environment. This shows the soft skill and then immediately moves on to what's important. Number 60, not customizing your resume for a cybersecurity role.
The common mistake.
Answer: a candidate with a general IT or computer science background uses the exact same resume to apply for a SOC analyst role, a software developer role, and a network admin role. The resume's objective and summary are generic, and the skills listed do not align with the specific job description.
Why this is a red flag: the impact.
1. It is obvious to the recruiter and looks lazy. Recruiters can immediately tell when they have received a generic, mass-emailed resume. It signals that you are not genuinely interested in this specific role or company. 2. Fails to pass automated screening. ATS: many companies use applicant tracking systems that scan resumes for specific keywords from the job description. A generic resume will lack these keywords and will be automatically rejected. 3. You fail to tell a coherent story. Your resume should tell a clear story: I am an aspiring cybersecurity professional. A generic resume tells a confusing story, leaving the recruiter unsure of your career goals.
The high signal solution: mirror the language of the job description.
Answer: you must have a master resume, but you should customize it for every single job application. The process is simple. First, carefully read the job description and highlight the key skills and responsibilities they are looking for, like SIM, incident response, phishing analysis, and EDR. Second, make sure those exact keywords are present in your skills section and project descriptions. Third, rewrite your objective or summary statement to specifically mention the role you are applying for. For a SOC analyst role, it should say, motivated and detail-oriented IT graduate seeking a SOC analyst position to apply my knowledge of threat detection and incident response. This simple customization will dramatically increase your callback rate. Number 61, adding irrelevant certifications without understanding the basics.
The common mistake.
Answer: A candidate lists a certification like the Certified Ethical Hacker, CEH, on their resume but, during the interview, is unable to answer fundamental networking or operating system questions that are prerequisites for that certification.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It suggests you cheated or brain-dumped the exam. This is a massive red flag for integrity. It tells the interviewer you are more interested in collecting badges than in actually learning and understanding the material. 2. Completely invalidates the certification's value. The certification is supposed to be proof of knowledge. When you cannot back it up, you not only look foolish but you also make the interviewer question the value of the certification itself. 3. It is a sign of misplaced priorities. It shows you are chasing shortcuts and resume keywords instead of building a solid foundation of knowledge, which is a very poor long-term career strategy.
The high signal solution, focus on foundational certs and master the material.
Answer: for a fresher, the strategy should be to focus on foundational, highly respected certifications and to know the material inside and out. Instead of chasing advanced certs, start with something like the CompTIA Security Plus. This certification is valuable precisely because it forces you to learn a broad range of foundational topics. The key is not just to pass the exam, but to use it as a study guide to truly master the concepts. It is far more impressive to an interviewer if you have a Security Plus, but can talk in depth about every single topic in its curriculum, than to have an advanced certification that you clearly do not understand.
Conclusion for Chapter 6, your resume is a statement of integrity.
Ultimately, every one of these resume mistakes comes down to one thing: integrity. Your resume is your professional handshake, and it must be honest, focused, and authentic. A resume that is filled with exaggerated skills or fake projects will be exposed. A strong resume is one that is built on a foundation of real projects, genuine curiosity, and a clear, customized narrative that says, "I am ready and genuinely excited for this specific role." Getting this right is the first and most critical step in your job search.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
G. Behavioral and soft skill mistakes.
We now move from what you know to how you are. Technical skills can get you the interview, but soft skills are often what get you the job. In a high-stakes field like cybersecurity, your ability to communicate clearly, work in a team, and handle pressure is just as important as your ability to analyze a log file. These mistakes are often subconscious, but they have a major impact on how an interviewer perceives your professionalism and potential. Number 62, not speaking clearly.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate has excellent technical answers, but they mumble, speak too quietly, or trail off at the end of their sentences. The interviewer has to constantly ask them to repeat themselves or lean in to hear them properly.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It projects a severe lack of confidence. Mumbling is often interpreted as uncertainty. If you do not sound confident in your own answer, it makes the interviewer doubt its accuracy. 2. Shows poor communication skills. Clear communication is essential during a security incident. If an interviewer cannot understand you in a calm interview setting, they will have zero confidence that you can communicate effectively during a high-stress event. 3. It is frustrating for the interviewer. Making the interviewer work hard just to hear and understand your answers is exhausting and creates a negative interview experience.
The high signal solution, practice articulation and breath control.
Answer: this is a physical skill that can be trained. First, record yourself. Practice answering common questions and listen back, specifically for volume and clarity. Second, practice speaking from your diaphragm, not just your throat. Take a deep breath before you answer, which provides more power and volume. Third, consciously focus on enunciating the last word of every sentence. This simple trick forces you to maintain your energy and volume all the way through your thought, preventing you from trailing off. Clear, confident speech is a sign of a clear, confident mind. Number 63, poor English communication.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate's answers are filled with grammatical errors, incorrect word usage, or are structured in a way that makes their technical points confusing and hard to follow. The interviewer struggles to understand the core message behind the words.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Directly impacts your ability to perform the job. A huge part of a security analyst's job is writing clear and concise incident reports, communicating with stakeholders, and documenting procedures. Poor language skills are a direct hindrance to this. 2. Can lead to critical misunderstandings. In a security context, ambiguity is dangerous. An imprecise or grammatically incorrect report could lead to the wrong action being taken during an incident. 3. Reflects poorly on your professionalism and attention to detail. Attention to detail is a key trait for a security professional. Consistently poor grammar suggests a lack of this trait.
The high signal solution, simplify your language and practice professional phrasing.
Answer: the goal is clarity, not complexity. First, use simple, direct sentences. Avoid trying to use complex vocabulary you are not comfortable with. It is much better to say, the firewall blocks bad traffic, than to say, the firewall facilitates the mitigation of malicious network ingress. Second, create a phrasebook of professional, structured sentences and practice using them. For example, practice starting your answers with clear framing statements like, the primary difference between those two is. Or, I would approach that problem in 3 steps. This structured language makes you sound more professional and makes your answers easier to understand. Number 64, lack of confidence.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate's answers are filled with qualifiers and upward inflections that make them sound like questions. They say things like, so, I think a SIM is a tool for logs, right? Or, maybe the answer is a firewall.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It completely undermines your technical knowledge. Even if your answer is 100% correct, delivering it as a question makes it sound like you are just guessing. 2. Interviewers hire for confidence, not just correctness. They want to hire someone who can be trusted to handle a problem. A lack of confidence suggests you would be hesitant and uncertain during a real incident. 3. It can be perceived as a lack of conviction. A security professional often has to make a strong case for a particular security control or action. This communication style suggests you would be unable to do so effectively.
The high signal solution, make declarative statements and eliminate qualifiers.
Answer: the solution is to train yourself to speak in declarative statements. First, physically remove weak qualifier words from your practice answers. Go through your notes and delete words like, I think, maybe, probably, and sort of. Second, Practice answering with a downward inflection at the end of your sentences. This makes your statements sound like facts, not questions. Even when you are genuinely unsure, project confidence in your thought process. It is much better to confidently say, "My initial hypothesis would be," than to timidly say, "Well, maybe it could be." Number 65. Not maintaining eye contact.
The common mistake.
Answer. During a virtual or in-person interview, the candidate consistently looks down at their notes, up at the ceiling, or off to the side, rarely making direct eye contact with the interviewer.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a major sign of disengagement or a lack of confidence. It can be interpreted as disinterest, nervousness, or even dishonesty, as if you are trying to hide something or are reading a script. 2. Prevents the formation of a professional connection. Eye contact is a fundamental part of human communication and building rapport. Avoiding it makes you seem distant and hard to connect with. 3. Can be distracting for the interviewer. When a candidate's eyes are darting all over the room, it can be distracting and make it harder for the interviewer to focus on the content of the answer.
The high signal solution. Practice the look at the camera technique for virtual interviews.
Answer. This requires conscious practice. For in-person interviews, the goal is to maintain natural eye contact while the interviewer is speaking and for a good portion of the time while you are speaking. For virtual interviews, the solution is specific. You must train yourself to look directly at the green light of your webcam, not at the interviewer's face on the screen. This will feel unnatural to you, but to the interviewer, it will look like you are making perfect, direct eye contact. Practice this with a friend. It is a small change that has a massive impact on how you are perceived. Number 66. Sounding desperate for the job.
The common mistake.
Answer. The candidate ends the interview by saying things like, "I really, really need a job, and I will do anything to work here," or they oversell their enthusiasm to a point where it seems insincere or unprofessional.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It reverses the professional dynamic. An interview is a two-way street. You are evaluating the company just as they are evaluating you. Desperation makes it seem like a one-way plea, which lowers your perceived value. 2. Can be interpreted as a lack of other options. It might signal to the interviewer that you are not a competitive candidate and that this is your only opportunity, which can be a negative indicator. 3. It puts the interviewer in an uncomfortable position. It shifts the conversation from a professional evaluation to an emotional appeal, which is unprofessional and can make the interviewer feel awkward.
The high signal solution. Frame your interest as professional enthusiasm, not personal need.
Answer. You should absolutely express strong interest in the role, but frame it around the professional opportunity, not your personal situation. The key is to connect your enthusiasm to the company and the role itself. Instead of sounding desperate, say this at the end of the interview: "Thank you for your time. Based on our conversation about the team's focus on cloud security and incident response, this role aligns perfectly with my skills and career aspirations. I'm very enthusiastic about the opportunity to contribute and grow here." This sounds confident, professional, and genuinely interested, not desperate. Number 67. Interrupting the interviewer.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer is in the middle of asking a multi-part scenario question, and the candidate, eager to show they know the answer, jumps in and starts answering before the interviewer has even finished speaking.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a major sign of poor listening skills. It shows you are more interested in talking than in listening and fully understanding the question. This is a critical failure in a field that requires careful analysis. 2. It can be perceived as arrogant and disrespectful. Cutting someone off is a universally rude behavior. It shows a lack of professional courtesy and can immediately create a negative impression. 3. You may answer the wrong question. By interrupting, you might miss a crucial piece of context or a constraint at the end of the question, leading you to give a completely incorrect or irrelevant answer.
The high signal solution. Practice the 3-second pause rule.
Answer. The solution is a simple but powerful discipline. Train yourself to always pause for a full 3 seconds after the interviewer has finished speaking before you begin to answer. This does three things. First, it absolutely guarantees you will not interrupt them. Second, it gives you a moment to actually process the full question and structure your thoughts. Third, it makes you appear more thoughtful and deliberate, which are highly valued traits in a security professional. It is a sign of respect and intellectual discipline. Number 68, being rude or overconfident.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks a basic question to test foundational knowledge. The candidate scoffs and says, "That's a really basic question, obviously the answer is." Or they challenge the interviewer's technical knowledge in an aggressive or dismissive way.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is an instant no hire for cultural fit. Arrogance is a toxic trait. No one wants to work with someone who is dismissive and thinks they know everything. This is a major character flaw that will get you rejected immediately. 2. Shows a lack of professional humility. Cybersecurity is a field where you must be a constant learner. Overconfidence suggests you are unteachable and will not work well in a collaborative team environment. 3. It is deeply disrespectful. The interviewer is taking their time to evaluate you. Treating them with disrespect is a sign of poor character and a complete lack of professionalism.
The high signal solution: be confident but humble, and treat every question with respect.
Answer: the goal is confident humility. You should be confident in your knowledge but humble enough to know there is always more to learn. Treat every question, no matter how simple, as a serious and valid inquiry. Answer it respectfully and directly without any added commentary about its difficulty. If you disagree with a technical point, frame your response collaboratively, not confrontationally. Instead of saying, "You are wrong," say, "That's an interesting point. The way I have always understood it is." This opens a discussion rather than starting a fight. Remember, they are evaluating you as a potential colleague, not just a technical resource. Number 69, speaking too fast or too slow.
The common mistake.
Answer: when nervous, a candidate speaks incredibly quickly, rushing through their answers and making them hard to follow. Conversely, another candidate speaks so slowly and deliberately that the interview's energy dies, and they cannot get through many questions.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Speaking too fast shows nerves and a lack of control. It can make you seem panicked and your answers can come across as a jumbled brain dump rather than a structured thought. 2. Speaking too slow can be interpreted as low energy or uncertainty. It can make the interviewer feel impatient and can give the impression that you are struggling to recall basic information. 3. Both extremes hinder effective communication. The goal is a clear, conversational pace. Either extreme makes it difficult for the interviewer to absorb and engage with your points.
The high signal solution: match the interviewer's pace and use pauses intentionally.
Answer: the key is to find a controlled, conversational pace. First, consciously try to mirror the interviewer's general pace of speaking. This is a natural communication technique that helps build rapport. Second, use pauses as a tool. If you tend to speak too fast, taking a deliberate breath and a short pause before answering a key point can force you to slow down. If you speak too slowly, try to structure your answer into a few key bullet points in your head and deliver them with a bit more energy. The best solution for both is to practice. Record yourself answering questions and listen back specifically for your pacing. Your goal is to sound like you are having a professional, engaging conversation, not giving a frantic speech or a boring lecture.
Conclusion for Chapter 7: Your character is on display.
Ultimately, every one of these behavioral mistakes reveals something about your character and professionalism. An interview is not just a test of your knowledge, it is a test of your ability to be a good colleague. By communicating with clarity, confidence, and respect, you are demonstrating the soft skills that are essential for success. You are proving that you are not just technically competent, but also someone the team will genuinely want to work with every day.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario, based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
Professionalism mistakes.
This chapter covers the fundamentals of professional etiquette. These mistakes may seem obvious, but they are surprisingly common and can end your candidacy before you answer a single technical question. Getting these right is the easiest way to show that you are a serious, respectful, and prepared candidate. These are the table stakes for any professional interview. Number 70, showing up late.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interview is scheduled for 10 a.m. The candidate joins the virtual call or arrives at the office at 10:05 a.m., offering a brief apology or, even worse, no apology at all.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a massive sign of disrespect. It immediately tells the interviewer that you do not value their time. They are busy professionals who have set aside a specific block in their schedule for you. 2. Demonstrates poor time management and planning. If you cannot manage your time to show up for a critical interview, it suggests you will be unable to manage your time to meet deadlines for the job. 3. Starts the interview with a negative impression. You are immediately starting from a deficit. Instead of evaluating your skills, the interviewer's first impression is that you are unreliable. It is very difficult to recover from this.
The high signal solution, the 15 and 5 rule.
Answer: the solution is to treat punctuality as a core part of your preparation. Follow the 15 and 5 rule. For an in-person interview, plan to arrive in the parking lot 15 minutes early, and then walk into the building's lobby 5 minutes before the scheduled time. This gives you a buffer for traffic and allows you to be calm and collected. For a virtual interview, you should test all your links and hardware 15 minutes early, and then join the actual call 3 to 5 minutes before the start time. This shows you are prepared, respectful, and eager. Number 71, incorrect interview dress code.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate shows up for a formal corporate interview wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and a hoodie, or conversely, shows up for an interview at a casual tech startup wearing a full, formal 3-piece suit.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of research and judgment. Dressing appropriately shows that you have taken the time to understand the company's culture. A mismatch shows a lack of preparation or poor social awareness. 2. Can unconsciously bias the interviewer. While it should not, your appearance is part of your first impression. Dressing too casually can be perceived as a lack of seriousness, while dressing too formally can make you seem like a poor cultural fit. 3. It can make you feel uncomfortable and less confident. If you feel out of place because of your clothing, it can affect your own confidence and performance during the interview.
The high signal solution, do your research and default to business casual.
Answer: the solution is simple research. First, ask the recruiter. They will often tell you the expected dress code. Second, look up the company on LinkedIn and see what employees are wearing in their profile pictures or company photos. This will give you a good sense of the culture. When in doubt, the safest and most professional default for almost any tech or corporate interview is business casual. This typically means a collared shirt or a professional blouse. It is always better to be slightly overdressed than underdressed. It shows you are taking the opportunity seriously. Number 72, poor camera or mic setup for online interviews.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate joins the virtual call with a grainy, low-light video where their face is in shadow, and their audio is muffled, distant, or has a significant echo.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It creates a frustrating and distracting experience. If the interviewer has to strain to see or hear you, they are focusing on the technical problems, not on the quality of your answers. 2. Shows a lack of preparation and professionalism. In a world of remote work, having a professional virtual presence is a basic expectation. A poor setup suggests you have not prepared for this fundamental aspect of the interview. 3. Makes you seem technologically incompetent. For a tech role, being unable to set up a basic video call is a particularly bad look. It undermines your credibility as a tech professional.
The high signal solution: test and optimize your virtual handshake.
Answer: your virtual setup is your new handshake, and it must be professional. First, for video, lighting is key. The primary light source should be in front of you, not behind you. Sit facing a window or place a simple lamp behind your laptop. Ensure your camera is at eye level. Second, for audio, a headset with a microphone is non-negotiable. Using your laptop's built-in mic will almost always result in poor quality. A simple, inexpensive headset will provide clear, crisp audio and eliminate echoes. Finally, test your setup with a friend or by using the video tool's built-in testing feature at least 15 minutes before the interview begins. Number 73, eating or multitasking during virtual interviews.
The common mistake.
Answer: during the interview, the candidate is audibly typing on their keyboard, checking their phone just out of frame, or even eating a snack, assuming the interviewer will not notice.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is the ultimate sign of disrespect. This tells the interviewer that they do not have your full attention and that you do not consider the interview to be important. It is a massive breach of professional etiquette. 2. Shows a complete lack of focus and self-awareness. The interviewer will assume that if you multitask during an interview, you will be unable to focus on your work during the job. 3. You will be noticed, and it will end your candidacy. These actions are never as subtle as people think. The sound of typing is obvious, and the shift in eye contact when looking at another screen is easy to spot. This is often an instant disqualifier.
The high signal solution: create a sterile cockpit environment.
Answer: the solution is to treat a virtual interview with the same focus as an in-person one. Before the call, create a sterile cockpit. This means you close every single application and tab on your computer that is not the video call itself. Put your phone on silent and place it in another room. Ensure you are in a quiet space where you will not be interrupted. Have a glass of water, a pen, and a notepad on your desk, and nothing else. For the duration of the interview, your entire focus should be on the conversation. This level of preparation shows respect and professionalism. Number 74, not researching the company.
The common mistake.
Answer: at the end of the interviewer asks, "So, what do you know about our company and what we do?" And the candidate gives a generic answer like, "I know you are a big tech company," or admits they have not had a chance to look into it.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a clear lack of genuine interest. It signals that you are not interested in this specific company. You are just looking for any job. Companies want to hire people who are enthusiastic about their mission. 2. Demonstrates poor preparation and a lack of initiative. This is the most basic preparation step for any interview. Failing to do it shows a fundamental lack of effort. 3. Prevents you from asking intelligent questions. If you do not know what the company does, you cannot ask insightful questions at the end of the interview, which is another major mistake.
The high signal solution, the 3-point company research method.
Answer: before every interview, you must do a minimum amount of research. Use the 3-point method. Point 1. The mission. Go to the company's About Us page and understand their primary product or service in one sentence. Point 2. Recent news. Do a quick Google News search for the company's name to see if they have recently launched a new product or had a major announcement. Point 3. The role connection. Think about how the security team supports the main product. For a financial company, you could say, I know your company provides a mobile banking platform, so I imagine the security team is heavily focused on protecting customer financial data and ensuring the availability of that platform. This shows you have done your homework and are already thinking about how you can add value. Number 75. Not understanding the job description.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer says, the job description mentions experience with cloud security is a key part of this role. Can you tell me about your experience there? The candidate seems surprised and says, oh, I did not realize this was a cloud-focused role.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a sign of carelessness and a lack of attention to detail. It shows you did not even read the document that describes the job you are applying for. This is a massive red flag for a detail-oriented field like cybersecurity. 2. It wastes everyone's time. It immediately reveals a fundamental mismatch between your skills and the role's requirements, meaning the entire interview process has been a waste of time for both you and the interviewer. 3. Makes you seem desperate and unfocused. It reinforces the idea that you are just applying to every job you see without any thought or strategy, rather than targeting roles for which you are a good fit.
The high signal solution: print and annotate the job description before the interview.
Answer: the solution is active preparation. Before every interview, print out a physical copy of the job description. With a highlighter, mark the top 3 to 5 key responsibilities and required skills. Then, next to each highlighted item, jot down a quick note or an example from your own experience that relates to it. Have this annotated document on your desk during the interview. This not only ensures you are prepared to speak about every key requirement, but it also allows you to naturally steer the conversation towards your strengths that you know are a perfect match for the role. It shows you are organized, prepared, and serious about the position. Number 76. Not knowing what the company's product or service is.
The common mistake.
Answer: this is a more specific version of not researching the company. The interviewer asks, how do you see our main product, the data analytics suite, fitting into the market? The candidate is unable to answer because they do not even know what the product is.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a complete disconnect from the business mission. The company exists to build and sell its products or services. Not knowing what they are shows you have no understanding of the business you are asking to join. 2. Makes it impossible to discuss relevant security risks. All security risks are contextual. The risks facing a healthcare data company are different from the risks facing a video game company. You cannot have a meaningful security conversation without understanding the product. 3. It is a sign of low effort and disinterest. It takes just 5 minutes on the company's homepage to understand their core offering. Failing this step is a sign of extreme laziness.
The high signal solution: frame security in the context of the product.
Answer: go beyond just knowing the product, connect it to your future role. First, be able to describe the product in one sentence. For example, as I understand it, your data analytics suite is a SaaS platform that helps businesses visualize their sales data. Second, connect it to security. You could say, from a security perspective, that's fascinating. I imagine that protecting the confidentiality and integrity of your customers' sales data is the number one priority, and ensuring the availability of the platform is critical for your business. I'm very interested to learn more about the security controls you have in place to protect that core asset. This shows you have done your research and are already thinking like a member of the team. Number 77, giving unrealistic salary expectations.
The common mistake.
Answer: when asked about salary expectations, a fresher with no professional experience and limited certifications asks for a salary that is typical for a senior-level engineer with 5 to 7 years of experience.
Why this is a red flag. The impact.
1. Shows a complete lack of industry and market research. It indicates that you have not researched the typical salary bands for an entry-level role in your specific geographic location. 2. Can make you seem arrogant or delusional. Asking for a salary that is far outside the norm for your experience level can make you seem out of touch with reality. 3. It can end the conversation prematurely. If your expectation is dramatically higher than the approved budget for the role, the recruiter may simply end the process there, assuming you will never accept a realistic offer.
The high signal solution. Provide a researched range and emphasize flexibility.
Answer: the solution is to do your homework and answer professionally. First, research. Use websites like Glassdoor, Levels.fyi, and LinkedIn Salary to find the typical salary range for a SOC Analyst 1 or entry-level Cybersecurity Analyst in your city. Second, when asked, always give a range, not a single number. This shows flexibility. Third, frame your answer professionally. Say this: based on my research for an entry-level cybersecurity role in this area, I'm looking for a salary in the range of, your researched range, for example, $65,000 to $75,000. However, I am flexible, and I'm most interested in finding the right opportunity to grow my skills and contribute to the team. This answer is confident, shows you have done your research, and signals that you are a reasonable and professional candidate.
Conclusion for Chapter 8. Professionalism is the price of entry.
Ultimately, professionalism is about respect. Respect for the interviewer's time, respect for the company's mission, and respect for the interview process itself. By being punctual, prepared, and professional, you are not just making a good impression, you are demonstrating the fundamental character traits of a reliable and trustworthy future colleague. Getting these basics right is the foundation upon which all your technical skills are judged.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section. These questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
Domain awareness mistakes.
Cybersecurity is not one single job, it is a vast and diverse industry with many specialized domains. The mistakes in this chapter reveal a candidate's lack of awareness of the industry's structure. Understanding these different domains, roles, and concepts is crucial. It shows the interviewer that you have a map of the territory and have thoughtfully considered where you want to begin your career journey. Number 78, thinking cybersecurity equals hacking only.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, what interests you about a career in cybersecurity, and the candidate's entire answer revolves around hacking, penetration testing, and finding exploits, even when applying for a defensive or compliance-focused role.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Reveals a narrow, Hollywood view of the field. This is a classic fresher mistake. It shows an immature understanding of the industry, where the vast majority of jobs are in defensive, governance, and architectural roles, not offensive ones. 2. Creates a major role mismatch. If you are applying for a SOC analyst, blue team, role, an obsessive focus on red team activities signals to the interviewer that you will be bored and disengaged with the actual job duties. 3. Can come across as unprofessional. While understanding offensive techniques is important, a fixation on hacking can suggest a lack of interest in the more methodical, process-driven work that defines corporate security.
The high signal solution: express a balanced and defensively focused interest.
Answer: show that you have a mature, holistic view of the field. Say this: while I find the offensive side of security fascinating for understanding an attacker's mindset, what truly interests me about a career in cybersecurity is the challenge of defense at scale. I'm drawn to the problem-solving aspect of a SOC analyst role, the idea of being a digital detective, analyzing data from different sources to identify a threat, and then working with a team to protect the organization. The idea of building and maintaining secure systems and responding to real-world incidents is what I'm truly passionate about. Number 79, not knowing the different domains of cybersecurity.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, beyond a SOC analyst, what other career paths are you aware of within cybersecurity, and the candidate is unable to name any other major domains.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of industry research. It indicates that the candidate has not explored the structure of the field they are trying to enter. It suggests their interest is superficial. 2. Demonstrates a lack of long-term career planning. Companies want to hire people with the potential to grow. This answer suggests you have not thought about your career beyond this first entry-level job. 3. It is a missed opportunity to show ambition. Naming a few domains shows you see a future for yourself in the company and the industry, which is a very positive signal.
The high signal solution: name several key domains and their core functions.
Answer: show you have a map of the industry. Say this: absolutely. While I'm focused on starting my career in a SOC role on the defensive operations side, I know it is a very broad field. I'm aware of several other key domains, such as GRC, or governance, risk, and compliance, which focuses on policy and audits, IAM, which is all about managing user identities and access, cloud security, a specialized and growing field, and of course, penetration testing, which is on the offensive side. Understanding how all these domains work together is what makes a security program effective. Number 80, confusing a SOC analyst with a system admin.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, what do you expect your daily tasks to be as a SOC analyst, and the candidate includes tasks like patching servers, configuring network devices, and managing user accounts.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of the role's function. This answer describes the job of a system administrator or IT operations, not a security analyst. The roles are distinct. 2. Shows you have not researched the job description. Any SOC analyst job description will clearly state the duties are focused on monitoring, analysis, and response, not system administration. 3. Creates a major mismatch in expectations. It tells the interviewer that you would be unhappy with the actual duties of the job, as they are different from what you expect. This makes you a risky hire.
The high signal solution: define the role by monitor, detect, respond.
Answer: clearly and accurately describe the function of a security analyst. Say this: I understand that the SOC analyst role is primarily a defensive monitoring and response function, which is different from a system admin who is responsible for building and maintaining systems. My expectation is that my daily tasks would revolve around the core mission of the SOC, monitoring the SIM for security alerts, analyzing those alerts to determine if they are true incidents, and, for a Level 1 role, performing initial triage according to documented playbooks. While I would collaborate with the system admins during an incident, my job is not to patch the server, but to detect the threat and provide the analysis needed for the response to be effective. Number 81. Not understanding the difference between blue team and red team.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer asks the candidate to explain the difference, and they say, the red team are the hackers, and the blue team are the security people, offering no further detail.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is core industry terminology. This is a very basic concept that demonstrates your level of immersion in the cybersecurity culture and language. 2. It is an overly simplistic, movie definition. The answer misses the entire purpose of these teams, which is to work together in a structured exercise to improve the organization's security. 3. Fails to mention the purple team concept. A more advanced answer would touch upon the collaborative aspect, showing a more modern and mature understanding.
The high signal solution, defined by function and goal, emulate versus defend.
Answer. Use a clear, goal-oriented definition. Say this. The difference is in their function during a security exercise. The red team's job is to emulate the tactics, techniques, and procedures of real-world attackers. They perform simulated attacks to test the organization's defenses in a controlled way. The blue team is the internal security team, like the SOC analysts and incident responders, whose job is to defend the network. During an exercise, their goal is to detect and respond to the red team's simulated attack as if it were a real one. The ultimate goal of this exercise is for both teams to work together to identify gaps in the defense. This collaborative process is often called purple teaming, where both sides share information to make the whole organization stronger. Number 82. Not understanding compliance basics.
The common mistake.
Answer. The interviewer for a company that handles credit card data mentions PCI DSS, and the candidate has no idea what the acronym stands for or what its purpose is.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of business and regulatory awareness. Security does not exist in a vacuum, it often exists to meet specific legal and regulatory requirements. This is a huge part of the why behind many security controls. 2. Indicates you have not researched the company's industry. If you are applying to a financial, healthcare, or European company, you are expected to have a basic awareness of the major regulations that govern them. 3. It is a sign of an immature understanding of corporate security. A fresher is not expected to be a compliance expert, but they are expected to know that these frameworks exist and drive many security decisions.
The high signal solution, know the big three and what they govern.
Answer. You do not need to be an expert, but you must be aware of the major frameworks. Be prepared to say, while I'm not a compliance expert, I understand that compliance frameworks are a major driver for security programs. I'm aware of the big three. PCI DSS is the payment card industry data security standard, which is a mandatory requirement for any company that handles credit card data. GDPR is the General Data Protection Regulation, a very strict data privacy law that protects the data of EU citizens. And ISO 27001 is a broad and well-respected international standard for an information security management system, which provides a comprehensive framework for managing an organization's security. Understanding which of these applies to the company is key to understanding its security priorities.
Conclusion for Chapter 9, Understanding the Playing Field.
Having domain awareness is about understanding the context in which you will work. It's about knowing the different players on the field, the rules of the game, and the overall objective. By showing that you understand the different roles, the relationship between offense and defense, and the business drivers like compliance, you are proving to the interviewer that you are not just looking for a technical task to complete, you are ready to be a thoughtful and effective member of a professional security organization.
Please check description or comments section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario, based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
J. Wrong expectations and attitude.
This chapter is about your mindset. An interviewer is not just evaluating your current skills, they are evaluating your future potential and your attitude as a professional. The mistakes in this section reveal a mindset that is misaligned with the realities of an entry-level role and the culture of continuous learning that defines cybersecurity. A bad attitude can be more damaging than a lack of technical knowledge. Number 83, expecting a high salary without skills.
The common mistake.
Answer: a fresher with no certifications and no hands-on project experience states a salary expectation that is well into the 6 figures, based on seeing high salaries for experienced professionals in the media.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a complete disconnect from reality. It demonstrates a profound lack of research into the market rates for entry-level positions versus senior-level positions. 2. Can be perceived as arrogance and entitlement. It suggests the candidate believes they are owed a high salary without having put in the work to develop the valuable skills that command such a salary. 3. Signals you are primarily motivated by money. While compensation is important, a candidate whose primary focus is an unrealistic salary can be seen as less passionate about the actual work and the mission of security.
The high signal solution, focus on opportunity and a realistic, researched range.
Answer: your attitude should be focused on the opportunity to learn and grow, with a salary expectation grounded in reality. The correct approach is to do your research on entry-level salaries in your specific location. When asked, state that researched range and frame it with the right attitude. Say, my main priority right now is finding the right role to start my career, build my skills, and contribute to a great team. Based on my research for entry-level roles in this area, my salary expectation is in the range of your realistic, researched range. This shows you are reasonable, have done your homework, and are prioritizing growth. Number 84, expecting to work only on hacking tasks.
The common mistake.
Answer: when asked what they are looking for in a role, a candidate for a SOC analyst position says, I'm really excited to start doing penetration testing and finding vulnerabilities, showing a complete misunderstanding of the defensive nature of the job.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a massive role mismatch. This is the clearest sign that the candidate does not understand the job they are applying for and will be unhappy and disengaged with the actual day-to-day tasks. 2. Shows a lack of research and professional maturity. It reinforces the Hollywood hacker stereotype and shows the candidate has not researched the realities of corporate cybersecurity roles, especially on the defensive side. 3. Makes you a very risky hire. The interviewer will assume that you will become bored with the core duties of a SOC analyst: monitoring, triage, analysis, and will likely leave the job quickly to pursue an offensive role.
The high signal solution, align your passion with the role's actual duties.
Answer: you must show enthusiasm for the job you are actually interviewing for. For a SOC analyst role, say this: what excites me most about this role is the detective work. I'm passionate about the idea of being on the front lines of defense, analyzing real-world data in the SIM to hunt for threats, and being part of the team that responds when an incident occurs. While I appreciate the offensive side, my interest lies in building and defending secure systems, and this SOC analyst role is the perfect place to start that journey. Number 85, expecting a job without certifications or skills.
The common mistake.
Answer: a candidate's resume has no relevant certifications, like Security Plus, no home lab projects, and no demonstrated hands-on skills, yet they express frustration about not being able to get an interview or a job.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a sense of entitlement. It implies the candidate believes they are owed a job simply for having an interest, without putting in the necessary effort to become qualified. 2. Demonstrates a lack of understanding of a competitive market. Cybersecurity is a high-demand field, but it is also highly competitive. This attitude shows a naive view of what it takes to break in. 3. Indicates a passive, rather than proactive, mindset. The candidate is waiting for an opportunity to be given to them, rather than actively creating their own opportunities through self-study and practical projects.
The high signal solution, adopt a mindset of demonstrating value.
Answer: the solution is an attitude shift. You must understand that your goal is to demonstrate value to a potential employer before they ever speak to you. You do this by earning foundational certifications like the CompTIA Security Plus, which provides a structured learning path and a verifiable credential. You do this by building a home lab, which demonstrates initiative and provides you with real skills to talk about. A degree is not enough. You must prove your passion and capability through these proactive efforts. The job is not something you are given, it is something you earn through dedicated preparation. Number 86. Not willing to start as an L1 analyst.
The common mistake.
Answer: a fresher with no professional experience, when asked about their career goals, says they are not interested in a Level 1 SOC analyst role because it seems boring and they want to start as a Level 2 or as a penetration tester.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows arrogance and a lack of respect for the process. It is like a medical student saying they want to skip their residency and start as an attending surgeon. The L1 role is where you learn the essential, foundational skills of a defender. 2. It is a completely unrealistic expectation. Companies do not hire freshers with no experience into L2 or pentesting roles. These positions require the deep, practical knowledge gained from handling real-world incidents, which is what the L1 role provides. 3. Indicates you are not coachable. This attitude suggests you think you know more than you do and that you are not willing to put in the time to learn from the ground up.
The high signal solution, show eagerness to master the fundamentals.
Answer: frame the L1 role as the critical foundation for your entire career. Say this: my immediate goal is to earn a position as a Level 1 SOC analyst. I see that role as the absolute best place to build the foundational skills of a great defender. It is where you get the reps, the daily experience of triaging real alerts, working with a SIM, and learning the company's environment from the ground up. I believe that mastering the fundamentals as an L1 is the essential first step to becoming a highly effective L2 analyst, incident responder, or any other advanced role in the future. I am eager to start at that foundational level. Number 87. Comparing cybersecurity to IT support.
The common mistake.
Answer: when asked why they want to move from IT support to cybersecurity, the candidate says, it seems like the next step up from help desk, or they describe security tasks in IT support terms, like closing tickets.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It minimizes the specialization of the security field. While IT support is a valuable and challenging role, cybersecurity is a distinct and highly specialized discipline, not just an advanced help desk. This comparison shows a misunderstanding of the field's complexity. 2. Shows a ticket closer mindset, not an investigator mindset. IT support is often focused on resolving a user's issue and closing the ticket quickly. Security is about deep investigation, analysis, and understanding the root cause, which is a fundamentally different mindset. 3. Fails to articulate a passion for security itself. It suggests the candidate sees security as just another rung on the IT ladder, rather than a field they are genuinely passionate about for its unique challenges.
The high-signal solution, differentiate by the adversarial nature of the work.
Answer: acknowledge your IT background but clearly state what makes security different and appealing to you. Say this: my experience in IT support has given me a great foundation in understanding how systems work and how to troubleshoot problems. However, what draws me specifically to cybersecurity is the adversarial mindset. In IT support, you are typically fixing something that is broken. In security, you are defending against an intelligent, active adversary who is trying to break things. That shift from a reactive, problem-fixing role to a proactive, strategic, and investigative role is what I find incredibly compelling and challenging. Number 88, wanting shortcuts instead of learning.
The common mistake.
Answer: the interviewer asks, how do you stay up to date with the latest security threats, and the candidate mentions that they are looking for exam brain dumps for their next certification.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. This is a massive red flag for integrity and ethics. Using brain dumps is cheating. Admitting this shows a profound lack of ethics and a willingness to take dishonest shortcuts, which is unacceptable in a security professional. 2. Shows a focus on credentials, not competence. It proves the candidate is more interested in getting a piece of paper than in actually acquiring and retaining the knowledge the certification is supposed to represent. 3. Suggests they will take shortcuts on the job. The interviewer will assume that if you take shortcuts in your learning, you will also take shortcuts in your work, potentially leading to security gaps and incidents.
The high-signal solution, describe a process of continuous, legitimate learning.
Answer: show that you are a dedicated, self-motivated learner who is engaged with the community. Say this: staying current is critical in this field, and I have a few methods I rely on. I follow trusted security news sites like the Hacker News and Bleeping Computer for daily updates. I also subscribe to podcasts like Darknet Diaries to understand the broader context of cybercrime. For deeper technical learning, I'm an active user of platforms like TryHackMe, which provides hands-on labs to practice new skills. My approach is to dedicate a few hours every week to continuous learning, because the threat landscape is always evolving. Number 89, saying, I'll learn after I get the job.
The common mistake.
Answer: when asked about a skill listed in the job description that they do not have, the candidate says, I do not know that yet, but I'm a fast learner and I will learn it on the job.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a passive and unimpressive stance. This response shows zero initiative. The company is hiring you to solve their problems now, not to start learning from scratch on their dime. 2. Makes you uncompetitive. Other candidates will have already started learning that skill on their own time. This answer puts you at a significant disadvantage. 3. It can sound like an excuse. While being a fast learner is good, using it as a blanket statement for every knowledge gap sounds like an excuse for a lack of preparation.
The high-signal solution, show proactive learning, not reactive promises.
Answer: acknowledge the gap but immediately demonstrate that you are already actively working to close it. Say this: that's a great point. I saw that specific skill, for example, Splunk, was a key requirement for the role. While I do not have professional experience with it yet, I recognized it as a gap in my knowledge, so last week I signed up for the free Splunk Fundamentals course online and have started building a small data set in my home lab to practice writing basic SPL queries. I'm excited to continue developing that skill. This proactive approach is 1,000 times more impressive than a passive promise to learn later.
Conclusion for Chapter 10, your attitude is your brand.
Ultimately, your attitude and expectations are your personal brand. The right mindset, one of humility, proactive learning, and a genuine passion for the defensive mission of security, is what companies are hiring for in an entry-level candidate. They know you will not have all the skills, but they are betting on your potential. By demonstrating a professional attitude and realistic expectations, you are showing them that you are a safe and valuable investment for their team.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
K. Interview closing mistakes.
The final 5 minutes of an interview are incredibly important. How you close the conversation can solidify a positive impression or undo all the great work you have done. This is your last chance to demonstrate your intelligence, enthusiasm, and professionalism. The mistakes in this chapter are common and easily avoidable, yet they can have a major impact on the final hiring decision. Number 90. Not asking any questions.
The common mistake.
Answer. At the end of the interviewer says, "So, do you have any questions for me?" The candidate simply replies, "No, I think you have covered everything. I do not have any questions."
Why this is a red flag. The impact.
1. It is a massive sign of disinterest. This is the single biggest indicator that a candidate is not genuinely interested in the role or the company. An engaged and curious candidate will always have questions. 2. Shows a lack of critical thinking. The interview is a two-way street. Not having questions suggests you have not been critically evaluating the opportunity or thinking deeply about the role. 3. A huge wasted opportunity. This is your chance to learn crucial details about the team, the challenges, and the culture, and to further impress the interviewer with your thoughtfulness.
The high signal solution. Have a prepared list of insightful questions.
Answer. You must always have at least 3 to 5 thoughtful questions prepared. They should not be simple questions whose answers could be found online. Good questions focus on the team, the challenges, and the culture. For example, what are the biggest security challenges the team is currently facing, or, can you describe what a typical day or week looks like for a level 1 analyst on this team, or, how does the security team measure success? These questions show you are thinking like a future team member, not just a job applicant. Number 91. Asking irrelevant questions.
The common mistake.
Answer. When asked if they have questions, the candidate asks things that are completely unrelated to the role or are focused on trivial administrative details, like, what's the company's policy on holiday parties, or, how many monitors will I get?
Why this is a red flag. The impact.
1. Shows a lack of professional focus. These questions suggest your priorities are not aligned with the professional aspects of the job. It can make you seem unprofessional or immature. 2. Wastes the interviewer's valuable time. You have a limited time to ask questions. Wasting it on trivial matters instead of substantive ones reflects poorly on your judgment. 3. Fails to gather important information. This is your chance to find out if you will be successful and happy in the role. Irrelevant questions do not help you make that assessment.
The high signal solution: keep your questions focused on the role and team.
Answer: your questions should be designed to help you understand the job and to demonstrate your professional mindset. Focus your questions on 4 key areas: the role, what would you consider the most important qualities for someone to succeed in this position; the team, what is the team's culture like in terms of collaboration and mentorship; the technology, what are the primary tools the SOC team uses on a daily basis; and the future, what are the biggest growth areas for the security team in the next year. These questions are professional, insightful, and relevant. Number 92, asking about salary first.
The common mistake.
Answer: when the interviewer asks, "Do you have any questions for me?" the very first question the candidate asks is, "What is the salary for this position?" or "What are the benefits like?"
Why this is a red flag: the impact.
1. It signals your primary motivation is money, while compensation is important. Leading with this question makes it seem like it is the only thing you care about, which can be a turn-off for a hiring manager looking for a passionate team member. 2. It is a breach of professional etiquette. The convention is to discuss salary and benefits with the recruiter or HR, typically after the technical interviews have established a mutual interest. 3. It puts the hiring manager in an awkward position. Often, the technical interviewer is not the right person to discuss compensation details with. This question is better saved for the appropriate stage of the process.
The high signal solution: save compensation questions for the recruiter.
Answer: the rule is simple: never bring up salary with the hiring manager unless they bring it up first. Your time with the technical team is for you to demonstrate your skills and evaluate the role and the team culture. If you have questions about salary, benefits, or paid time off, you should direct those to the recruiter or the HR contact either before the technical interview or after you have received an offer. Keep the conversation with the hiring manager focused on the work itself. Number 93, not asking about growth or training.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate asks several questions about the role's daily tasks, but fails to ask a single question about the opportunities for learning, development, or career progression.
Why this is a red flag: the impact.
1. Shows a lack of ambition and a growth mindset. Companies want to hire candidates who are eager to learn and grow with the company. Not asking about this suggests a lack of long-term ambition. 2. It can be interpreted as a lack of passion. A candidate who is truly passionate about cybersecurity will be very interested in how they can continue to learn and improve their skills. 3. A missed opportunity to evaluate the company. The company's answer to this question tells you a lot about whether they invest in their employees. It is a critical piece of information for you.
The high signal solution: make growth a key part of your questions.
Answer: you must ask a question that shows you are thinking about your future and your development. This is one of the most impressive things a fresher can do. Ask one of these: what opportunities for training and professional development, like certifications or conferences, does the company provide for the security team, or what does the typical career path look like for someone starting in this L1 analyst role? Are there opportunities to grow into L2 or other security domains within the company? This question shows you are not just looking for a job, you are looking for a career. Number 94, not thanking the interviewer.
The common mistake.
Answer: after the question and answer portion is over, the candidate simply says, "Okay, thanks, bye," and waits for the interviewer to end the call.
Why this is a red flag: the impact.
1. It is a basic failure of professional courtesy. It is a small thing, but it can leave a lasting negative impression. It makes you seem ungrateful and can come across as rude. 2. Ends the interview on a weak and awkward note. The final impression is just as important as the first. A weak closing feels unprofessional. 3. A missed opportunity to reiterate your interest. The closing is your final chance to make a positive statement about your enthusiasm for the role.
The high signal solution, deliver a confident and grateful closing statement.
Answer: you must have a professional closing statement prepared. It should be concise and hit 3 key points: gratitude, enthusiasm, and a forward-looking statement. Say this: thank you again for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation and learning more about the team and the challenges you are working on. The role sounds like a fantastic opportunity, and I'm very enthusiastic about the possibility of joining the team. I look forward to hearing about the next steps. This is a powerful, professional, and positive way to end any interview. Number 95, leaving the call abruptly.
The common mistake.
Answer: the moment the interviewer says, "Okay, that's all my questions," the candidate immediately clicks the "Leave Meeting" button, sometimes even before the interviewer has finished their sentence.
Why this is a red flag. The impact.
1. It is extremely rude and jarring. This is the virtual equivalent of turning and walking out of the room while someone is still talking to you. It is a major breach of etiquette. 2. Shows an eagerness to escape. It makes it seem like you could not wait for the interview to be over, which completely negates any interest you might have expressed. 3. Leaves a final, lasting impression of unprofessionalism. This is the very last thing the interviewer will remember about you, and it is a terrible final impression to leave.
The high signal solution, always let the interviewer end the call.
Answer: the rule is simple and absolute. You are the guest, you never end the meeting. After you have delivered your professional closing statement, simply smile, nod, and wait. The interviewer, as the host, will then say their goodbyes and will be the one to end the virtual meeting. This is a small but critical sign of respect and professional discipline. It ensures the interview ends on a calm, courteous, and professional note.
Conclusion for Chapter 11, Closing with Confidence and Class.
The close of your interview is your final performance. By asking insightful questions, focusing on professional growth, and ending the conversation with gratitude and respect, you are solidifying your image as a thoughtful and mature candidate. These closing actions demonstrate that you are not just interested in getting a job, but that you are serious about building a career and being a valuable, professional member of a team.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
Post-interview mistakes.
We have reached our final chapter. The interview is not over when you leave the call. Your professionalism in the post-interview phase can still have a significant impact on the final decision and your professional reputation. These final mistakes are about maintaining a high level of professionalism from start to finish and ensuring you end your candidacy on the strongest possible note, regardless of the outcome. Number 96. Not sending a follow-up thank you email.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate has a great interview but never sends a thank you email to the interviewer or recruiter afterward.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is a major breach of professional etiquette. Sending a thank you note is a standard, expected part of the professional interview process. Failing to do so can be seen as a lack of courtesy or follow-through. 2. Can be interpreted as a lack of interest. In a competitive situation between two equal candidates, the one who sends a thoughtful thank you note is demonstrating a higher level of interest and professionalism. 3. A missed opportunity to reiterate your value. The thank you email is your final chance to briefly restate your enthusiasm for the role and mention a key point from the conversation that reinforces why you are a great fit.
The high signal solution: send a PRV email within 24 hours.
Answer: you must send a thank you email within 24 hours of the interview. The best emails are concise and follow the PRV structure. P for professional thanks: thank you again for your time today. R for reiterate interest: I truly enjoyed our conversation, especially our discussion on, mention a specific, interesting topic from the interview. V for value statement: I am even more confident that my skills in, your key skill, would be a valuable asset to your team. I am very enthusiastic about this opportunity and look forward to hearing about the next steps. This is professional, personal, and reinforces your value. Number 97. Sending unprofessional messages.
The common mistake.
Answer: the candidate's follow-up email is overly casual, filled with slang, emojis, or typos. Or, worse, they try to connect with the hiring manager on informal social media platforms like Instagram or Facebook.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a severe lack of professional judgment. The communication standard for a job application is formal and professional. A casual tone shows you do not understand these boundaries. 2. A lack of attention to detail. An email with typos and grammatical errors signals carelessness, which is a very bad trait for a security professional. 3. Crossing professional boundaries is a major error. Attempting to connect on personal social media is inappropriate and can make the hiring manager extremely uncomfortable.
The high signal solution: keep all communication formal and on professional platforms.
Answer: the rule is simple. All post-interview communication should be formal and conducted through official channels. Your thank you email should be written like a professional business letter with a proper salutation and closing. Proofread it multiple times before sending. The only social media platform it is acceptable to connect on is LinkedIn, and it is best to wait until after the hiring process is fully concluded to send an invitation. Keep it professional, respectful, and formal at all times. Number 98. Asking for results too quickly or aggressively.
The common mistake.
Answer: the day after the interview, the candidate sends an email to the recruiter asking, "Do you have an update yet? Have you made a decision?" and continues to send messages every day.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It is impatient and shows a lack of understanding of the hiring process. Hiring takes time. There are other candidates to interview and internal discussions to be had. Pestering the recruiter is a sign of professional immaturity. 2. Can be perceived as annoying or desperate. Constant follow-ups can quickly turn a positive impression into a negative one. It can make you seem like a high-maintenance candidate. 3. It will not speed up the process. Sending multiple emails will not make the decision happen any faster. It will only damage your rapport with the recruiter.
The high signal solution: follow the recruiter's timeline and be patiently professional.
Answer: the best approach is to be patient and professional. At the end of your interview, it is appropriate to ask the recruiter, "What can I expect for a timeline on the next steps?" Whatever they say, respect that timeline. If they say you will hear back in a week, do not email them after 3 days. If you have not heard back a day or two after their stated timeline has passed, it is perfectly acceptable to send one polite, brief follow-up email. Say, I hope you are having a great week. I'm just checking in on the timeline for the SOC Analyst role. I remain very interested in the opportunity. That's it. Be patient, professional, and respectful of their process. Number 99, ignoring feedback from HR or the recruiter.
The common mistake.
Answer, the candidate is rejected for the role. The recruiter sends a polite email and offers some constructive feedback, for example, the team felt you needed stronger foundational networking skills. The candidate gets defensive, argues with the recruiter, or simply ignores the email.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. It burns a bridge with a valuable professional contact. Being rude or defensive after a rejection ensures that this recruiter will never consider you for a future role at that company. 2. Shows an inability to accept constructive criticism. This is a major sign of immaturity. The inability to accept feedback means you're not coachable, which is a very undesirable trait. 3. A wasted learning opportunity. This feedback is a gift. It is a clear, actionable roadmap of what you need to work on to be successful in your next interview.
The high signal solution, accept rejection with gratitude and professionalism.
Answer, you must handle rejection with class. It preserves your professional reputation and turns a negative outcome into a positive networking touchpoint. Send a brief, professional reply. Say, thank you for letting me know and for providing that feedback. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed learning more about the team and the company. I will definitely work on strengthening my networking skills. Please keep me in mind for any future opportunities that may be a better fit. This response is professional, gracious, and leaves the door open for the future. It is the sign of a mature professional. Number 100, not preparing for the next round.
The common mistake.
Answer, the candidate passes the first technical interview with the hiring manager. The recruiter informs them that the next round will be with the director of security. The candidate assumes it will be the same type of interview and does no additional preparation.
Why this is a red flag, the impact.
1. Shows a lack of strategic thinking. Each interview round has a different purpose. Failing to recognize this and adapt your preparation is a major strategic error. 2. Leads to a mismatch in the interview. A director-level interview will be less about textbook definitions and more about your mindset, your passion, and how you think about business risk. Answering with the same technical definitions from the first round will fall flat. 3. Demonstrates a lack of preparation and seriousness. It suggests you are becoming complacent now that you have passed one round, which is a poor signal to send.
The high signal solution, adapt your preparation for each stage.
Answer, you must adapt your strategy for each new interviewer. After scheduling the next round, ask the recruiter, thank you. To help me prepare, could you tell me what the focus of this next conversation will be? For an interview with a senior leader like a director, shift your preparation. Be ready for bigger picture questions. Prepare to talk about why you chose cybersecurity, what you are passionate about learning, how you think about security's role in the business, and what your long-term career goals are. They are trying to assess your potential, your motivation, and your cultural fit, not just your technical knowledge. Prepare for that conversation.
Conclusion for Chapter 12, Finishing Strong.
As we have seen, your professionalism does not end when the interview does. By following up with courtesy, handling outcomes with grace, and preparing strategically for every stage, you build a reputation as a mature and reliable professional. This long-term mindset is what builds a great career.
Your masterclass is complete, from fresher to professional.
We have just covered 100 common mistakes, but the real lesson is not about fear, it is about confidence. The purpose of this guide was not to make you memorize 100 new rules, but to install a professional mindset. If you focus on understanding the why behind the concepts, on communicating with structure and integrity, on demonstrating proactive learning, and on carrying yourself with professionalism from start to finish, you will not just avoid these mistakes, you will naturally embody the qualities of a great security professional. The journey is challenging, but you now have the framework for success. Go forward, prepare with confidence, and build the career you deserve. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.
Please check description or comment section of this video. I have given a lot of links for downloading 6 PDFs containing all types of most asked interview question and answers like scenario-based, technical-based, behavioral-based, real-world problem-solving, generally most asked, and system design. Required for your cybersecurity jobs interviews like Junior Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity SOC Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity GRC jobs, Cybersecurity CISO jobs, Cybersecurity Incident Responder jobs, Cybersecurity Vulnerability Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Malware Analyst jobs, Cybersecurity Engineer jobs, Cybersecurity Architect jobs, Cybersecurity Manager jobs, Cybersecurity Consultant jobs, Cybersecurity Specialist jobs, etc., etc. These questions and answers are carefully curated by industry experts, saving you people hours of research and ensuring you people will have the most accurate and relevant answers. This PDFs includes scenario-based questions and answers, real-world problem solving, interview questions and answers where almost 80% of the people are failing to answer, system design questions and answers where almost 90% of the people are failing to answer, with detailed solutions, which are often missing from free online resources. A lot of people are claiming that these questions are coming in real interviews. So, grab them as soon as possible with both hands. Since these questions and answers covers basic to advanced interview questions and answers, that's why given 50 question and answers for each section, these questions and answers will be helpful for freshers, 2 to 3 years experienced people, and 5 or above years experienced people also for your interviews. You people can download all 6 PDFs in a single zip file from below given links.
For more exciting tips, tricks, and more importantly, for valuable insights of interviews, please share, like, and subscribe to my channel. It has a lot of valuable information about various insights of interviews. It has a wide range of real-world portfolio projects of various technologies for interviews, and it has wide range of most asked interview questions and answers of various technologies like data science, SAP, AWS, DevOps, and full-stack web development, and more that will be useful during interviews. It has a wide range of most asked interview questions and answers and real-world portfolio projects of various technologies for freshers, for 2 to 3 years, experienced candidates, and for 5 or above years, experienced candidates to test their skills by knowing most asked interview questions and make themselves ready for interviews.